All right, so this is, yes, this is something a little bit new. This is me trying out to make, everything just a little bit less, you know, thrown together ramshackle. And basically, I'm trying to stretch out a little bit. I'm using a new streaming processor, everything like that. We're going to see how this goes. The layout right now is going to change eventually, but for right now, I just wanted to see, well, if everybody liked it. So, yeah, how's everybody doing today? I'm going to be honest with you guys. I am literally, no, it's not GW copy strikeable. So I kind of just picked this. You probably will be able to see the chat down in the other window. I'll just move that over here. I think I need to make that a little bit bigger. What do you guys think? Let's see. Can I make this thing bigger? I do not know. Let me try something real quick. It's just an attempt. It's just an attempt. Good morning. Good morning. So, I am outrageously hot right now. It's ridiculous. We have a heat wave going through, and I just shut off my AC, so that's absolutely wonderful. There we go. Yes. All right. So, let me do one more edit to that. This is the first time I've actually used this in a stream, so excuse any bumps or hiccups along the way, because this is the first time that, I've used this in a stream. Boop. Yes, not a panther. The conspiracy is over. I hope that this looks a little bit better for you guys. I hope you enjoy it a little bit more. General manager gave you 4 consecutive days off this week, Sawyer. That's awesome. The conspiracy was explained via sock puppets. Yes, Adrian says, bigger! Bigger! All right, so now you guys can get an idea of kind of the general lag between what you guys see and what I see on the screen. The drawings of the sock puppets were absolutely awesome. And yes, I have refurbished not only the opening, but everything else inside. Alright, so, like I said, I'm in the middle of a heat wave. I am already sweating, and I just turned that thing off over there. So, it is hot in here. It's about 90 degrees outside with a ridiculous amount of humidity. We're not having that much fun here. Hey, Eternal, what's going on? Yes, there is chat and stream. So, I am doing a bunch of other stuff. Oh, thank you, Scribe. Scribe says, alright, the type of arrogant prat who refuses to tell her subordinate anything, makes her life hell out of spite, and whose idiocy almost gets them killed? Yes, I think we're going to be dealing with that today. Dominic is no longer watching your back right now. No, he's not watching my back because I turned him. Because if I didn't, he would freak me out every time I watched something SCP and then noticed him watching me in the background. So, Odette, I know the chat is a bit behind. That's because of the latency I am forced to run at. My internet is not the best based off location, not anything else. I'm using the best internet package that I currently have. Thank you, Scryer. Scryer says, add the utter certainty they're still brilliant and underlying actively trying to kill them, and that's Cicerette. Also, sorry to hear about the hate. Yeah, it is hot. Yes, Defies, he is always there. He is always watching, and he is always judging as well. Yes. Alright, so, this gives me a little bit more information. I, of course, have the startup screen I really like. I'm going to be adding a couple of other screens, and there may be other things I can do. So, it's actually quite Diclonius. I actually had this thing in mind that I had for Diclonius because I was fitting, there's a whole bunch of widgets and, bells and whistles and stuff like that come with the streaming software I'm using right now that I'm trying to get started using. And one of them was a wheel where we could decide how we're going to exterminate people. In particular, Diclonius for writing that My Little Pony fanfic with the Dark Angels. It's just not... Why would you do this? Yeah. Eternal, one of the reasons I'm going to be trying to get a new microphone is because the one that I have is omnidirectional. That's why you can hear literally everything that's going on in here. It is. It is kind of annoying, but at the same time, it is what it is. In any case, we're here. Everybody's happy. I've updated the Streamlabs OBS, Darius. Everybody's happy. The picture and the frame are kind of shifted. Huh. A little bit. 1 second. Click. Oh. Oh no. Oh no. The dangers of working with technology. The dangers. Alright, there we go. I think I have it. I think I have it. Yeah. I don't have it. Do I have it? Do I have it? Oh my god. Oh my god. I tried. Okay, that's about as good as it's going to get right now. Hold on. I'm sorry, guys. Oh, jeez. Okay. Oh my god, what did I do this time? I keep on doing things. Alright. Yes. Is the fish cannon on the wheel? Yes, Ronnie, the fish cannon was on the wheel. Oh god. Yeah, see this thing, I'm repurposing everything. I'm kind of like our boys. Oh my god, what in the world is going on with this? Stop! This is so bad. Yeah, this is bad. Okay, there we go. Okay, is it good? Best I can do. It's sad. There we go. Okay, there, it's fine. God, I suck! Aquila says people like Warhammer and people like Warhammer, people like My Little Pony and people like Warhammer. Of course, he got a lot of likes. All right, so who's ready for the next part of Guardsman Party while I sit in my sauna and sweat bath? And this one's called the Stealth Mission Observation. Burb, okay, bud. Burb says he's gonna have to leave for a bit. His mother made food and will kill him if he doesn't come right now. Go ahead. Mr. Rick says he hates this website. Defy says a fish cannon is antiquated. We can do things far more interestingly horrible to Diclonius. Let's go. Yeah, here we go. Oh, come on, mouse. Get over there. There we go. Oh my god. Everything is going wonky.
This is complete bullshit. Tink's inherently whiny voice rang through the barracks, triggering exasperated groans from its other occupants. It's the mindless, reactionary vilification of anything new by a bunch of narrow-minded, overzealous tech illiterates who wouldn't recognize scientific progress if it bit them in their paranoid asses. Nubby's head poked out of the large crate he was rummaging through. I don't know. If this scientific progress stuff is actually going around biting people, they might have a point. Across the room, Twitch leaned out from behind the blast shield that separated his workshop from the rest of the room. What if it's something that's supposed to bite people? Like a cybermastiff or a wallet?
Nubby what?
Tilted his head to the side and scratched one of his boils as he pondered this. I don't think wallets are supposed to bite people, Twitch. Mine does. Remember that time you tried to pick... I wasn't trying to do nothing. I was just looking for me keys. In my pockets. Well, I'd already checked on mine. The two troopers' argument was brought to a halt as Tink, tired of being ignored, ran between them and started shouting, "Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!" This is serious. They're going to make us leave everything. Look! Tink shoved the data slate he was holding under Nubby's nose. Nubby, His face screwed up with effort, began running a finger along the line of text Tink indicated. Teams gear not to include any armament or devices of a non-adeptish mechacapish
Really?
cowboy approved origin. Nubby looked up at Tink in confusion. The hell does that all mean? It means, replied the techie, no pulse carbines, no plasma gun, and no spot. What? Let me see that. The data slate was abruptly ripped from Tink's hands by Twitch, who began scanning at a far faster pace.
Yes, everybody.
Oh, shit, there's more.
YouTube needs to refurbish
All three
its
troopers
notification
bent
system.
over the data slate. No more than 20 kilograms of Munitorum Grade B explosives. Do you even have any Munitorum issue explosives left? Asked Nubby. Twitch just shook his head and held up the cluster of lasgun power packs he'd been taping together. Oh well, don't worry. I'm sure I can work something out if we can get to a depot. Nubby paused as Tink and Twitch both pointed at the last line on the data slate. No items considered contraband under Administratum Edict G something stroke 7.
They're doomed. Twitch can't bring an entire arsenal with him. They're doomed.
17E. Commissarial degree number. Cogboys Arbitrace Quisition.
Thank you, Aquila. Aquila says, okay, that's just discrimination against Twitch. Yes, and discrimination is wrong. They need some tolerance training over at the commissariat. You can't, no, it's terrible.
Ecclesiarchy. What does the ecclesiarchy got to do with what I can or can't bring on a mission? This is mental. Who's making these rules? Tink straightened up and tried to recapture his initial indignant tone. These are direct orders from Inquisitor Sisitat. Wasn't he the one who got squished by the bug? He get better or something? No, the Inquisitor, the one from the stasis cell, he's taking command. What? That pillock? Does Sarge know about this? He's in on it. They're both down in one of the conference rooms with the diplomacy adept, planning some sort of suicide mission. There was a pause while this sank in, followed by Nubby swearing and Twitch abruptly shouting, "It's happening! I knew it!" and sprinting out of the room. Nubby watched the demolitions trooper go, then turned to Tink and asked,
F in the chat for Twitch.
Out of curiosity,
He's gonna lose it.
how exactly did you get this here list? Tink brushed the question aside. That's not important. What is important is that we get together and make it clear to Sarge that we are not going to have any part in this. We've got to stand up and say no. We're going to go off on a mission without proper equipment.
Right.
Nubby, his self-preservation instincts kicking in, took a step backwards. Tink failed to notice. We're not going to get ourselves killed on some horrible backwater just because of some Inquisitor's ridiculous prejudices. We're not? Nubby.
And see, that's the thing. If you're an Inquisitor and your people are trying to bring along anything they want to basically do the mission, why would you ever stop them?
Took another step backwards. No, we're going to march in there and tell Sarge that either he gets rid of these ridiculous rules or he goes on this mission alone. Tink let out a strangled little yelp as a large hand landed on his collar and yanked him backwards.
Yay!
Somewhere behind Tink, a very deep and angry voice growled, "Guardsman, a word, please." Nubby watched Sarge drag Tink out of the room and let out a sigh
Guardsman, a word, please.
of relief as the door slid shut. After a few seconds of standing around, listening to muffled shouting and thumping sounds coming through the door, he decided it was probably a good idea to go figure out where Twitch went. and possibly join him. Sarge's rules about what you can and can't bring on a stealth mission with Inquisitor asshat. No pulse weapons. Because people will notice when Lay's guns fire little blue balls of plasma. That's why.
Yeah, this is true.
No Tink's techno-heretical plasma monstrosity. No spot. Not even if you make him a really good disguise. Nothing. No matter how small, easy to hide, or awesome, which could be described with the prefix Zeno. No, we are not bringing Theo. Why would you even ask that? No more.
Oh, so we can airlock him.
More than 20 kilograms of Munitorum issue explosives. No piles of ammunition for weapons we don't use. Nothing that is almost but not quite an explosive. Nothing that came out of Sergeant Gravis. No chemical, biological, or warp-based weapons, period. No contraband. If you have to ask, it's contraband. Your bags will be checked, Nubby. No fumbles or aiming. Just because fumbles can turn invisible sometimes does not mean he's stealthy.
Right.
Medical patients regrowing their entire scalp are not stealthy either. No Jim, Hannah, or Sister Valerie.
Oh, man.
Because they're staying on the occurrence border. No occurrence border. Because a space Hulk is the opposite of stealthy. That's why. No detailed plans to kill the Inquisitor, desert, and enlist in the Colthian Foreign Legion. Because the Emperor hates you. That's why. The all-Guardsman party, and Inquisitor asshat's stupid stealth mission.
Yay.
So no shit we'd finally delivered the requested zoanthrope.
So no shit there we were.
It had taken the crippling, marooning, and deaths of 2 squads of Space Marines, gratuitous use of heretical xenotech, an assault on a technically friendly civilian space station, the second worst warp voyage in the history of the Imperium, our arrest on trumped-up charges by a traitorous Inquisitor, yet another pitched battle when said Inquisitor tried to steal the zoanthrope for his private collection, and the general maiming of yet another squad of Marines. But we'd finally delivered it. Admittedly, the bug had suffered some wear and tear during transit, what with the theoretically impossible demonic possession, and the way it had been beaten to the very edge of death by a humorously shaped piece of wraithbone wielded by an enraged space marine. But nowhere in our orders did it say that the thing had to be in good condition.
This is true.
It was a zoanthrope. It was alive, if only barely, and the most ungrateful, pedantic asshole would dare complain about the quality of the package after the sheer hell we'd been through to deliver it. Of course, ungrateful, pedantic, and asshole were just about the perfect words to describe Inquisitor Sysitat. And if you added batshit insane, it'd cover the Magos that ran the research facility as well.
True.
The first thing the two of them did after the Inquisitor had been released from stasis was hold a meeting with us.
Get in line, Guardsman. Get in line. It's train time. Yeah, it reminds me of what's in the box. Ronnie says if we airlock the Tau pet that needs to be neutered, can't be airlocked, boss. He'll mix with the human sewage, and no filthy towels should be mixed with good human shit. Yes! Going to the front, it's train time, my boys. Do not worry about the short ones. Do not worry about the short ones at all. They are squats, and they love you.
The diplomacy adept, and a few of their own minions. Supposedly, it was to catch everyone up on the overall situation and plan the next move. But it was really just several hours of people yelling, lecturing, and just generally blaming us. Seriously. everything was our fault.
Mm-hmm.
It was our fault that several members of Systatat's team had died during the battle in the evidence warehouse.
Uh-huh.
It was our fault that the traitorous Inquisitor had died before he could be questioned.
Uh-huh.
It was our fault that several extremely rare and valuable xenobiological specimens had escaped, died, or been turned into squakes.
Oh, thank you, Slacker. Inquisitor, shit talks the Black Templar. Sigismund, all I heard is I'm a dirty traitor. Please kill me. Anyone else? Various other Templars. Yep. Then we're all in agreement. Anyone else have anything to say? Sigismund, oh my god. Sigismund is a beast. He remains a beast. And it, oh god. What, Aquila, you can't remind me of it's squigging time. It's like, that's almost as bad as it's Morbin time, okay? The amount of times I wish the Ghost of Sigismund would just show up and just start beheading people is just astronomical. It needs to happen. Yes, Obsidia. Horus falling to chaos and killing Sanguinius, our fault. It blows my mind how many times in the military things would magically be our fault when everyone else that was higher ranked than us had everything to do with it, and we were just sitting there like, okay, but... And then we would be told just to shut up and follow orders. It was just like that. Thank you, Slacker. How is it their fault, Odette? How is it their fault? Because they exist, and they're low-ranking enough to... And they were in a particular position where they could be scapegoated. Any military person knows that the second a higher up can find a subordinate to sit there and lay the blame on and make themselves look pearly white in contrast, they'll fucking do it. Like that. Beheading people left, right, and center would probably raise the general IQ of the Warhammer Galaxy. This is absolutely true. God, I'm sweating. Thank you, Slacker. I appreciate it, bud. Let's get back into it.
It was even our fault that a several light-year-wide shadow had fallen across the warp, disrupting astropathic communication, causing subsector-wide political turmoil, and prompting the redeployment of several Imperial fleets to protect against a supposed Hive fleet incursion.
Hive fleet Kraken, our fault.
Okay, in retrospect, putting the Demonthrope in an astropathic sanctum might not have been the best idea, but how the hell were we supposed to know that? The closest things we had had to experts on Psi were Theo and Fumbles. Oh, and finally, it had apparently been our inexcusably reckless actions which finally gave Oak's enemies the ammunition they needed to bring charges of treason against him.
Uh-huh.
So the whole entire current mess, the arrest orders against all of Oak's teams, the attacks on his allies under the cover of our official investigations, the seizure of the research facility and Sysatat's own imprisonment, and even Oak being forced to take his battleship into hiding, it was all our fault. Or at least, that's what Inquisitor Sysatat and his minions thought.
Right.
Personally, we blamed a combination of bad luck, everyone else being stupid, orcs, and the general perverse nature of the universe itself for at least 80% of all that.
At least 80.
As for the others, the Majos didn't seem to care about anything other than his specimens, and for all his complaining, he actually seemed very interested in the Demonthrope. And the diplomacy adept, who'd inexplicably wound up in charge of the discussion, claimed it didn't matter either way, and encouraged everyone to focus on the next step of their respective missions.
The Lord Inquisitor says, "Attention, citizens! The Man Emperor's Inquisition is now here. Please form an orderly line to be ready to confess your degrees of guilt."
The role in these missions was that of hapless gophers.
Right.
See, before the arrival of the traitorous Inquisitor and the Demonthrope's astropathic jamming aura, Oak had sent orders which assigned us to Sysatat's retinue for the duration of some vaguely defined investigation. Since the Inquisitor thought of us as a bunch of juvenile, tactless, indiscreet, and dangerously incompetent meatheads, and we all considered him to be a socially inept cogitator weenie with delusions of genius. Why we'd been paired up like this was a bit of a mystery, but the orders seemed genuine. It belatedly occurred to us that our decision, back on our second ever inquisitorial assignment, to ever so slightly falsify then interrogator Sysitat's after-action report might have been a bad idea.
It is.
Sure, before we'd edited it, the report had been full of accusations about incompetence and obstruction, and it had ended with a recommendation that we all be reassigned to a penal legion.
Right.
But maybe that was how all his reports were written.
I wouldn't be
And
surprised.
the way we'd removed all mention of our antics and put our own performance down as nearly adequate had wound up looking like high praise in comparison. Or maybe, as Twitch now insisted, Oak had seen through the forgery on day one, and this was his punishment.
Right.
Anyway, whatever the reason we'd been assigned to the asshole, we had no choice.
Ronnie says, I actually think the Lamenters have better luck than the Guardsmen. The Lamenters at least die in glory. These guys live in blame. This is true. This is sadly true.
But to stick to our orders. Well, actually, we could have told Sysitat and Oak to stuff it and then went off to do our own thing. But there's nothing like knowing that the Inquisition has issued a warrant for your arrest to motivate a cooperative attitude.
This is true.
So yeah, Inquisitor Sysitat was our new boss.
Great.
And his first orders were to stay out of my way and assist Major Smith in any way possible. Which is why we spent the next few days fetching, carrying, and occasionally squig wrangling for a tech priest who, in a totally unexpected twist of fate, turned out to be completely nuts.
Oh,
Well,
lovely.
Maybe not completely nuts.
It is completely
But
nuts.
that was only because the Majos was so far around the bend that he was reapproaching sanity from the opposite direction. First of all, it turned out that he wasn't actually the tech priest that we'd seen walking around with the Inquisitor and Diplomacy Adept. It took a while, but after the third incredibly awkward conversation with the inexplicably unresponsive tech priest, we finally figured out that it was actually the oversized servo skull that was calling the shots. The tech priest-looking body, as well as that giant man-beast we'd seen in the warehouse battle and a fair number of other freakish-looking things, were looking like a cross between a servitor and a full-body augmetic.
Yay.
He called them meat puppets, which should tell you everything you need to know about the state of his mind.
Uh-huh.
At first, some of us, mostly Tink, were rather curious about how a tech priest winds up as a disembodied brain flying around controlling a horde of servitors and flesh-sculpted monstrosities. When Tink tried to press the Majos on the why and how of his servo-sculliness, though, all he got was a vague comment about having done it to himself for political reasons. And
Majos Dominus Redditus.
an assurance that getting the brain out was the easy part, the hard part was getting the brain out. Then the Majos flew off cackling, only to return a few
Oh. Oh, I started to cross on that one.
minutes later to scream at us, for about the 15th time, for killing his prize Eldar test subject. Or maybe he'd been angry about the death of the lizard thing.
Uh-huh.
Or the group of bendies we let escape.
Uh-huh.
Or how his entire collection of Genestealer cultists had been squigged. It all sort of ran together after a while. Putting the Majos' weirdness aside, the reason...
Alright, guys, give me a second because I got to see if I can get some sort of crosshair going through here. The temperature in here has gotten to the point where I am literally smoldering. So give me 1 second. Won't take that long. Oh, God. Air. It's hot. It's hot in here. Jesus. Whew. And back to it.
The reason we were helping the crazy cogboy was that the brainy people had decided that the planet was no longer secure.
Huh.
The whole debatably heretical research facility needed to be packed up and moved via the first available Imperial vessel, which is to say, the Occurrence Border. You can just imagine how thrilled the captain and old Bill were to find out their ship would be playing host to a xenobiological research lab, complete with an insane Majos biologist.
Oh, lovely.
Numerous psychically gifted specimens, and the damned Demonthrope they'd only just finally gotten rid of.
No!
The only reason they limited their complaints to bitter grumbling, as opposed to orbital strikes, was the Occurrence Border's supply situation and the awkward tactical problem which had resulted from it. See, after such a long and hard journey without resupply, the Occurrence Border was out of just about everything. So, when it finally used the last of its fuel and the recoil from its macro turret to slow down enough to dock with the small refueling station orbiting above the facility, its captain was in a rather ruthless state of mind.
Imagine being the captain of the Occurrence Border right now. Like, Sudoku would be a very, 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 very good alternative. Why do they keep on doing shit like this? I just don't get it. It's just not right. Ronnie, prepare the fish artillery. Eat for immediate deployment.
Ex-naval officer, having had
Jesus.
here with politely asking, begging, and emperor forbid, paying for supplies that were rightfully his to requisition, had broadcast his ship's inquisitorial credentials and announced its intention to commandeer everything.
Oh my god.
Not everything as in...
Aquila, thank you, bud. A properly heretical research lab on the Occurrence Border. Yeah, this is going to go completely right with nothing going wrong. Seppuku, not Sudoku. It depends on who you ask, Adrian. Everybody has an opinion. And I said seppuku last time, and everybody said Sudoku. I said Sudoku then. Everybody's saying seppuku. And I just want to slam my head in the door because I'm just an idiot. And I'm just trying to do things the right way. Okay. Oh. Yeah. Everything is going to just be shitty on the Occurrence Border. There's no getting around it. There's going to be a couple more people in the poker room at the end of this.
Everything you can spare.
Oh god, Inception Gamer, you win the chat. Next, the Lamenters chapter is requisitioning to the ship.
Literally everything. As in, down to the crew, atmosphere, and the station itself. The locals objected to this, of course.
A little bit.
Complaining loudly that this sort of looting wasn't even remotely within the legal limits of the captain's inquisitorial charter.
Huh.
And called for aid from the only other ship in the system, a light cruiser which had brought the recently squished Inquisitor and his arrest team.
Lovely.
The light cruiser was a standard naval vessel that had been commandeered by the traitorous Inquisitor to provide transport and overwhelming fire support for his arrest team. After the initial excitement of its arrival, the ship had just sat in orbit serving as protection, astropathic communication provider, and storage for items that were too large to fit in the evidence warehouse, such as the facility's shuttles, and a small cogitator-filled normal space vessel that had been in orbit when they'd arrived. It had been a nice, boring assignment for them right up until their astropaths lost contact with the rest of the galaxy. Then, while they'd been off at the edge of the system, futilely attempting to outrange the astropathic jamming we'd unknowingly been broadcasting ahead of us, the Occurrence Border had arrived. By the time they managed to get back to the facility, their Inquisitor was very dead. Left to their own devices, they probably would have just destroyed the Occurrence Border and blockaded the research facility until the arrival of further orders. Fortunately for us, though, the Deathwatch apothecary had claimed command as the technically ranking survivor of the dead Inquisitor's retinue, and told the ship to stand down. The light cruiser had sat in orbit, waiting for the apothecary to finish his business on the planet, until the Occurrence Border started its looting spree and the station requested their aid. The ship's captain, being mindful of all the inquisitorial bullshit going on, voxed the apothecary for orders, and the Space Marine kicked the problem over to Sysitat, who probably made some sort of smug just-as-planned comment before voxing the Occurrence Border. The captain was basically asked whether he'd prefer to transport the Majos and his lab, or go toe-to-toe with a ship 10 times more combat-capable than his own. The captain went with the former, but it was a close thing. So, while shuttle after shuttle carried xenobiological specimens, techno-heretical research equipment, and bizarre servitors into orbit, the Occurrence Border's entire crew flooded into the little station, and under the guidance of old Bill and his engineers, set about looting the place more thoroughly than even the most determined freebooter could manage. Every scrap of fuel, supplies, and equipment aboard the station was commandeered.
Gotta love it.
The entire crew, down to the dependents, servitors, and family pets, was rounded up by the press gangs and given a once-in-a-lifetime chance to earn their passage out of the system as an indentured voidsman.
Oh, God.
Finally, the hand of backwater tech priests and administratum scribes that ran the place, and who were technically exempt from naval conscription, were given a choice between voluntarily joining the crew or staying behind as old Bill and his engineers sucked out the atmosphere, cut the station into manageable chunks with lance fire, and then strapped the pieces to the Occurrence Border's hull like hunting trophies. Of course, we weren't personally around to see the
I knew they were orcs. I knew they were orcs. We're in the land of Dampra. Oh, God. We're just trying to get Jackie the Khan back from the warp.
Entirety of the looting spree. We actually only stayed in the system for a few days before our new boss decided it was time to go. And during that time, we were all very busy helping the Majos move his lab. Well, I say we, but honestly, certain members of the team didn't pull their weight during the whole packing process. For instance, Amy dodged her fair share of work by collapsing in a...
Yeah, this is Lotora Sarin style, acquiring resources and voluntary personnel.
Heap about 10 seconds after the Astartes-grade painkillers she'd been given for her massive scalp wound wore off. She wound up spending the rest of her time in the facility lying around alternately moaning and swearing at the rest of us, and rode up on the first shuttle back to the Occurrence Border. Doc, no doubt encouraged by Amy's bad example, announced that he was too busy with medical things to do an honest day's work. At first, he insisted that keeping Amy's head from getting infected and falling off took priority over carrying boxes and hurting squigged gene stealer cultists. Then he just had...
They're bringing those on board. Oh, God.
Had to help the apothecary reattach his arm and get Hart and Grumpy Marine into stasis.
Lovely.
And after that, it was all, I've got to transfer my information on Sergeant Gravis's condition and fix the scalpel wound in my face. Lazy bastard. Sarge wasn't any help either. He kept running off to chat with the diplomacy and cogitator adepts about conspiracies and politics and how did you know the xenology adept was a traitor before you shot him. This newfound laziness was a perfect example of what promotion over the rank of sergeant does to a guardsman.
Right.
The worst of all were Tink and Jim. They were so desperate to avoid some honest work that they actually left the whole planet, taking our shuttle back up to the Occurrence Border before the ship had even finished decelerating. Jim claimed he had to go warn Hannah and the tech acolytes that someone called the Flesh Smith was still alive and would be coming aboard.
Why?
So he might have had an actual reason, but the only excuse Tink had was that he needed to go hide Theo before the little annoying Xenos wound up in the Majos' specimen collection.
And that would be a problem. Look, I get it. I don't have a problem with that, though. I don't have a problem with that. Let him go. Come on. I've been wanting to airlock him for a while now. Help me help you.
Of course, that turned out to be a load of bullshit. Firstly, the Majos found his super-secret hiding place all of 10 minutes after arriving on the ship. Secondly, all the Majos did upon seeing the annoying little Xenos was point out that Tau were genetically uninteresting and ask whether the room was the Xenotech garbage dump. He then tossed the battered remains of Spot, sans Wraithbone, he was apparently keeping that for himself, onto the floor and left without waiting for an answer. So yeah, time well spent. The point is that despite it being our inquisitorially assigned task, the only members of the team that actually did any real Majos moving were Nubby, Twitch, and Fumbles.
Huh.
While everyone else made up excuses, the three of them slaved away, carrying boxes and recaptured escaped specimens, while being screamed at by a crazy cogboy's disembodied head. They even used their own personal free time to collect desperately needed supplies for the team.
Right.
And did they get thanked for their efforts?
No.
No, it was all, we're not going to pay you for returning our pulse weapons. Deathwatch issue hand weapons and war gear cannot be claimed as legitimate battlefield salvage. That bolter wasn't gifted to us. Gifting is not, and never has been, an ancient Space Marine tradition. If you know where it landed...
The Blood Ravens would argue with this. Thank you, Slacker. Slacker says, I thought you'd be happier. He called the Tau garbage. Well, but he stated a fact. The Tau are garbage. Not sure... The Tau are garbage. He stated a fact. I mean, that's like the least radical thing he said. I don't understand. Thank you, but I don't understand.
Landed, go get it, and
I am seriously about to go get some frozen veggies from the freezer because I am smoldering in this room.
give it back to the apothecary. And it doesn't matter if they're not going to need them anymore. We're not taking any of the facility's anti-orbital missiles.
Why
with
not?
us. Even if, no, especially if Twitch says he can convert them to be man-portable. Anyway, putting aside matters of laziness and ingratitude, after a few days, almost everything was packed up, and word came down that Sysitat had finished digging through the dead Inquisitor's underwear drawer, or whatever he'd been doing. And it was time to get ready for our mission. Not that we knew what the mission even was. The closest thing to a briefing we'd gotten was our initial meeting with the Inquisitor, after we pulled them out of stasis and collected those of his retinue who'd survived the evidence room battle.
Okay, so just because Ronnie says, are you slow-cooked or slow-boiled, boss? Alright, so you have this right here. It doesn't look like there's light coming in, but the entire overside of this roof right here is legitimately, there's barely any insulation for it. And the air doesn't move around that well in this room at all. So this is the hottest part of the house by a huge measure, and it's like whatever it is outside, you constantly combat this. If you didn't do anything in here, the outside would actually be cooler than in here. So I'm constantly having to do things to try to keep it cool in here, and I'm not successful half the time.
That meeting had been singularly unpleasant.
Yes.
Aside from all the aforementioned yelling, realizing Sysitat was our new boss had come as a nasty shock.
I bet.
He'd been an interrogator last we'd seen him, back when he'd led our second ever inquisitorial mission. Back then, he'd been a self-important data analysis weenie, who sat around on a small, normal space Corvette stuffed to the bulkhead with cogitators, while his team did the dirty work of gathering intel and executing the over-complex plan he cooked up. Picture the most arrogant, annoying intellectual you've ever met. Then add a fondness for self-praise-filled meetings and berating his minions. And finally top it off with just enough analytical genius for him to get away with all this.
Sounds like my military
career. On our previous mission, he'd done a decent enough job of unraveling the mystery we'd been sent to solve. but in our opinion, he was a terrible interrogator and never should have been allowed to lead field ops. Of course, that had been a while ago, and time changes everyone. He wasn't an arrogant little shit of an interrogator anymore. Now he was an arrogant, moderately overweight shit of an inquisitor.
God.
Oh, and this time he was convinced that we were dangerously incompetent from the outset.
Sweet! Thomas Kennebec Thomas says, I feel my for you, boss. My old apartment was an oven. Thick cement wall. The GOT afternoon sun? Yeah, the afternoon sun. And it just kept the heat all night and no AC. Oh my god. Yeah. And the reason they're talking about Eldar, Ronnie, is because the Inquisitor was keeping that Wraithbone singer as a pet, apparently. I'm going to get that thing so I can cool down a little bit, guys. It is freaking hot in here. It is smoking hot in here. So I'm going to go get that thing so I can try to stay a little bit cool. I'll be right back. Not strategic or logistic genius, though, or awareness, or the ability to communicate with his peers. Oh my god. Oh my god. Yeah. Hot. Yes. Don't judge me. All right. Oh, that feels better.
Along with his charming self, the Inquisitor had also brought some of our former teammates along. The psychic eavesdropper, Snitch, was just as weasel-like and eager to report our thoughts to his boss as we'd remembered. Though he'd acquired a nasty skin affliction somewhere along the line, possibly due to the way that he constantly used his psychic powers.
Yeah, fuck him.
The other psyker to survive that mission, Face, seemed a little buffer than we remembered and carried a force sword now. And he'd added a bristly little mustache to his pretty boy look. Finally, noble-born social infiltrator chick was just as posh and assassiny as we'd remembered. But it also acquired a bunch of cyber mastiffs and had been promoted to interrogator.
Huh.
On top of the familiar faces, the Inquisitor's retinue included several combat specialists. Well, at least it had before the whole evidence room battle. Now it was down to just a cleric with a brand new augmetic arm and a Sororitas-style bolter instead of the usual flamer, and a wiry guy with far too many knives who literally had Death Cult Assassin tattooed on his forehead.
Lovely.
The final member of the team was the tech priest who maintained the Inquisitor's surveillance toys. His chief distinguishing feature was that he hated us. Actually, hating us was pretty universal. Snitch, Face, and the Interrogator all shared the Inquisitor's theory that we were completely unfit for inquisitorial service, and the Assassin and Cleric bore a serious grudge over how those of us in the evidence room had just edged around the battle instead of chipping in.
Oh,
We
cry
tried to
about
explain
it.
about how important dealing with the Demonthrope had been, and how we totally would have helped them if we'd known we'd have to actually work with them later, but they didn't seem interested in listening. Their hatred was more a mix of disgust and resentment, though. The tech priests was the real deal. See, he was one of those hardcore religious types.
Lovely.
And our collection of Xenotech weapons, especially Tink's Tau hybrid plasma gun, did not go over well with him.
I doubt it.
He fervently believed that we should all be killed in horrifically violent ways for our blasphemy. And while he wasn't quite crazy enough to act on that belief, he did make sure to regularly remind us that we were all damned to robot hell. So, yeah. These people, who respectively thought we were dangerously incompetent, blamed us for the death of their comrades, and wanted to burn us at the stake, or whatever the cogboy equivalent is, were the guys we were supposed to accompany and assist on their mission.
Don't you just love it? Don't you just love it?
Thanks, Oak. As far as what that mission was, all the Inquisitor was willing to tell us was that he had been sent to investigate an Imperial world that was believed to be a stronghold of the conspiracy. This wasn't exactly a wealth of information, but it was enough to convince us that we wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. Seriously, he was proposing going to a world that was under control of what had been described to us as a cabal of traitorous Inquisitors. You know, those guys who can requisition everything up to and including an exterminatus? I mean, as nasty as Inquisitors, especially ones mucking about with demonic powers, can be on their own, it's their massive, nearly unquestionable authority that really makes them scary. Having that on your side is great. Not only not having it, but actually going up against it? Not so much. What Sysitat was proposing wasn't a stealth mission. It was a, if someone even suspects you, an entire planet will hunt you down mission. That was just the backdrop.
Thomas, I don't think being a Walmart greeter would be too bad for hell. I can think of other things that would be much more hell. Can they just exterminate the planet? Apparently not, Ronnie. Go ahead and fish artillery them, though.
Emperor knew what sort of crazy shit the actual investigation was supposed to be centered around. Oh, and let's not...
This is strange. I am sitting here with this bag of, like, what? Let me see. Hold on. How much does this thing weigh? 5 pounds of mixed vegetables on my leg, and I'm leaning on it. And this is the most comfortable I've been in this room for the past hour.
Forget that our teammates, the only people on the entire planet we could trust to watch our backs, actively hated us.
Lovely.
Okay, maybe that's overselling things a bit. But it really was an unpleasant-sounding mission, and we responded to it in the traditionally guardsmanly fashion, which is to say that we desperately attempted to weasel our way out of our orders. Sadly, the entire situation turned out to be remarkably weasel-proof. Oak's orders attaching us to Sysitat were far too simple and direct for us to get away with creatively misinterpreting them, and we didn't have any better luck trying to get Sysitat to dismiss us. As distasteful as the man found working with us, he seemed to consider a suggestion from Oak roughly on par with a divine mandate.
Lovely.
Of course, divine mandates tend to be open to a bit of interpretation. While Sysitat was dead set on bringing us along, he made it clear that he wouldn't trust us to organize a piss-up in a brewery, much less perform an inquisitorial investigation.
Lovely.
This had led to our official designation as Dumb Muscle, which was just fine with us, but it had also led to the rules, which were less so.
Right.
Sysitat had described them to Sarge's face as an attempt to idiot-proof our part of the mission, and almost gleefully put the tech priest in charge of writing them. That, of course, led to a lot of arguing. Tink's little aborted attempt at mutiny, and a desperate scramble to find where all of our old weapons had gotten to, which ended in even more yelling. All of us had known that our supply of non-rechargeable munitions had been running low for ages.
Right.
The grenades and det packs had lasted almost to the end thanks to Twitch's hoarding, but the existence of things like crack missile launchers was just a vague memory. And Sarge's ammo-less grenade launcher had been traded away to some tech acolyte building a combat servitor long ago. What had been less well-known was that the hotshot lasguns, which had been shelved in favor of our pulse weapons, had been marked as extraneous and left in the possession of a certain rattling black marketeer in favor of more lucrative items. Nubby's justifications about how he'd been planning to just buy us new ones if we ever needed them didn't go over well with any of us. Long story short, we wound up armed for our upcoming inquisitorial mission with nothing but our sidearms and standard-issue lasguns from the Occurrence Border's armory, which sat especially poorly with Tink, who hadn't used one since Basic. Anyway, word came down that the Inquisitor had finished his pre-mission whatever it was, and it was time to move out. So we packed up our measly armament, and for the first time since we'd left Tau space, said goodbye to the Occurrence Border.
F the fish cannon Nubby.
While we weren't going to miss the horrible pile of warp-tainted scrap we'd been riding around on, its crew was another matter. So, on our way out, we paid a few last visits to say goodbye and make sure all of Twitch's little surprises had been disarmed, or at least documented. The captain and old Bill were too busy to do more than tell us not to get killed. Jim promised to look after our stuff and make sure nobody dissected Theo.
Come on!
Hannah thanked us for not trying to bring Jim. The diplomacy adept, who'd somehow wound up in charge of everything, asked Sarge to at least try to work with Sysitat, and said he'd take care of our official report to Oak, since the Occurrence Border would be proceeding directly to the Inquisitor's hiding place. As for the other adepts, the Cogitator adept wasn't in his room, and we didn't really care enough to try and find him, and the Xenologist was still dead. When we all visited the med bay, Amy wasn't really coherent enough to say goodbye. Unlike her previous two head injuries, this time every scrap of skin above her nose needed to be regrown.
Oh, good God.
So her head was pretty much this giant pile of bandages and, this being a Sororitas-developed procedure after all, prayer seals.
She is most definitely the German woman from Helsing. That's what she is. Pop, pop, watching heretics drop.
Amy was too doped up on painkillers to really understand anything, but Sarge tried to fill her in on the situation. The rest of us just stood around and speculated on whether the markswoman would still obsess over her hair, since this time her entire scalp would be regrown Sororitas white, and whether there was some sort of energy attack attracting magnet embedded in her skull anywhere.
Yeah.
Sister Valerie said she'd check. As for Doc's girlfriend, the two of them already said their disgustingly sappy goodbyes, and all she had for the rest of us was a promise that returning without our medic would just be a very slow and painful method of suicide. Our final stop was the poorly hidden lab where Theo was setting all his gear back up with Fumble's help. While Tink pulled Theo aside for a final go-over of the plans for Spot's third rebuild, being used as a bludgeoning weapon by a space marine isn't as bad as a nuclear blast, but it's pretty close. The rest of us said goodbye to our favorite psyker. We'd really wanted to bring the little guy, but the Inquisitor had flatly refused. And we couldn't really argue. When you get down to it, a psyker who uncontrollably broadcasts his emotional state and has problems controlling his powers at even the best of times has no place on a stealth mission.
Yeah, but come on, it's
also,
Fumbles.
He didn't really get along with the Inquisitor's psychers, especially Snitch, who claimed that Fumbles was like a cross between a painfully loud Vox unit and an unexploded artillery shell. Anyway, it sucked leaving Fumbles behind. but at least he took the news better than we expected. There was some initial moping, but he actually seemed pretty relieved not to be going to a heavily populated Imperial world where he'd have to worry about religious fanatics lynching him for having oversized eyes or just being a psyker.
Yes.
Also, he said it would be nice to get a break from constant life and death struggles, or at least as close to one as you can get as a psyker on a warp-tainted scrap heap of a ship.
True.
We wished the little guy luck. Nubby tried to give him a list of not quite legal things to trade for if the ship made any stops. Sarge hit Nubby, and then we rounded up Tink and left the occurrence border. It should have been a happy moment. There were few things we'd wanted more than to leave that horrible death trap. But honestly, given a real choice between whatever shit show of a mission was waiting for us and a 5-year stint on the occurrence border, we probably would have taken the latter. It just goes to show that the Inquisition can, and probably will, ruin anything. The shuttle that took us to the Inquisitor's ship was one of his. Officially, this was because all of the occurrence boarders were busy strip scavenging the station. Even Tink's repaired and defungused stealth shuttle was used, though everyone on it kept their void suits on.
No, yeah.
But it probably had more to do with how much harder that made it for us to sneak anything aboard. It was unnecessary, of course. We had given our solemn word to follow their stupid rules, after all,
And that's going to last
we knew from
approximately how
experience how
long?
hard it was to get stuff past Snitch. But that didn't stop that damned tech priest from inspecting our gear and baggage before he let us onto the Inquisitor's ship. The Inquisitor's ship was the same one he'd had back during our previous mission. A little corvette that was mostly just there to carry his massive cogitator array. It was small, cramped, unarmed, and didn't have a warp drive, all of which seemed like major design flaws to us. But for some reason, we hadn't been consulted when they'd built the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike a proper ship, it was crewed by only a couple dozen professional voidsmen and tech priests, who generally treated us like a visiting friend's incontinent little yappy dog. We got the distinct impression that they were still unhappy about the time we'd propped a dead psyker up in one of the bathrooms. Anyway, lacking a warp drive, the Inquisitor's ship depended on larger vessels to carry it between systems. Unfortunately, the only ship present, aside from the occurrence border, which wasn't going our way, was the light cruiser which had brought the arrest team into the system. This led to the very awkward situation where we had to ask for a lift from the ship that had recently boarded and impounded our vessel. Well, that is to say, it was awkward for the Inquisitor and his minions. We dismissed the whole situation as not our problem, and set about making ourselves as comfortable as possible in the cramped quarters we'd been assigned.
Yep.
Our time aboard the Inquisitor's ship was pretty unpleasant. The problem wasn't that he and his crew did anything to antagonize us. They sort of ignored us in the sort of put-upon way usually reserved for racist old relatives visiting for the holidays. And we did likewise. So really, it was...
I feel bad for Twitch right now because he can't just plant like 50 tons of explosives around there. I feel bad for him. His paranoia must be going crazy right now. Poor Twitch.
just like all of our missions before Sarge's promotion. Except for one big difference. Nobody let us do anything. We'd gotten used to being on a ship that suffered near-continuous warp phenomena, equipment failures, xenobiological infestations, and minor demonic incursions during even the smoothest of transits. There'd always been something that needed shooting, fixing, or fortifying, or a mission to plan for, or some sort of nubby-related scam going on. Compared to that, traveling on the Inquisitor's ship was just, well... Boring. Not that we were against being bored, mind you.
Welcome back, Wolf.
Life in the Guard is pretty much long periods of boredom punctuated by moments of sheer terror and orcs. So we were used to the boredom. In fact, we loved it, because the alternative tended to involve Xenos, heretics, superior officers, or some combination of the three trying to kill us. It was just that we didn't have enough space to enjoy our boredom. See, since the Inquisitor thought we were borderline retarded and therefore a massive hazard to operational security, we weren't invited to his stupid meetings. This was fine by us. We'd hated the meetings, and were perfectly okay with him just handing us a briefing when we got to wherever we were going. Unfortunately, in addition to not inviting us, Sysitat ordered us to stay in our quarters during all hours in which a meeting might be held. Presumably in case we overheard something and somehow managed to blab it to the enemy, despite being in the middle of bloody warp space.
Yeah.
Said quarters consisted of a single shared bunk room, and the Inquisitor's working hours lasted from 0700 to 2300. It was a miracle that nobody was killed. Let me tell you, 20 square meters with low ceilings is not enough space for 5 guardsmen.
No.
Well, technically, according to the Astra Militarum Regulations book, which the Inquisitor gleefully cited when we complained, it's enough space for either 8 standard-issue guardsmen, 12 rattling auxiliaries, 4 Ogren, or 26.5 Kriegers. But those regs are ideal circumstances, munitorum bullshit, and everyone knows it. Except the Krieger part.
Yeah.
Anyway, 16 hours a day, confined in a small room with Nubby, a chronic whiner relearning basic lasgun use, a hyperactive paranoid with no perimeter to secure, Nubby, a man who just would not shut up about his absent girlfriend, the grumpiest non-com in several cubic light years, and Nubby was just too much. The one small mercy was that Amy and Fumbles weren't along. Otherwise, we might not have even made it through the first day. As it was, we were all just about ready to strangle each other by the end of the third. Of course, we didn't just sit around waiting for things to reach that point. It was obvious from the get-go that we weren't going to survive the trip unless we got a little more space. Sarge wasted a fair bit of time trying to talk Sysitat around, but when that failed, we decided to just quietly annex a few rooms which we felt were underutilized.
There you go.
Unfortunately, some of the ship's crew noticed us hauling our stuff into the rooms of the guys who'd gotten themselves killed during that shit show at the research facility. Come on, it's not like they needed all that space anymore. When the Inquisitor and all his minions showed up to yell at us, Sarge made some very good points about efficiency and the importance of keeping morale up. But since Nubby and Tink were rooting through the deceased's stuff behind him, his arguments didn't go over very well. Our second attempt to expand our quarters was a bit more direct, and consisted of Tink rigging up a laser cutter and cutting through the wall between us and a storage room next door. Sadly, he only got a quarter of the cut done before that damned tech priest burst in and started screaming at us. The rest of the retinue showed up before we decided whether we could get away with shooting the cogboy and blaming it on our combat reflexes. That little incident ended with yet another painfully long lecture from the Inquisitor, which was capped off with a promise to kick us off the ship if we disobeyed orders again.
Okay.
Sarge, who was reaching critical levels of grumpiness at this point, began to respond with something along the lines of, "You can try," but reconsidered as the exact nature of that threat dawned on him, and wound up struggling to maintain a poker face and mind while the Inquisitor ranted. When the lecture finally ended with Sysitat and his minions storming out to return to their meeting, Sarge asked the rest of us how we felt about taking the Inquisitor up on his offer. That night, a note was taped across from the Inquisitor's door, regretfully informing him that we'd violated his orders against screwing with the ship's systems by disabling the forward airlock's alarms. And since he was asleep at the time, we'd undertaken to kick ourselves off the ship for him. What? Then we'd gathered our gear, donned our void suits, and one short walk through a depressurized assault shuttle bay later, we were arguing with a bunch of confused Navy armsmen about whether we were honored inquisitorial guests or a hostile boarding party. After everyone stopped pointing weapons at each other, except for Twitch, it only took us showing off Sarge's interrogator Rosette to convince the armsmen to kick the problem upstairs. Talking our way through the succession of Navy...
Slacker says, Night Lord, thank you, Slacker. Night Lords to civilians. Hippity-hoppity, your life is now my property. Dark Angels to anyone else. Repent, for tomorrow you shall die! Accurate. Extremely accurate. Thank you, Slacker.
The officers wasn't too hard, even if they are unquestionably inferior.
I'm loving the argument that's going on in chat right now. I'm loving it.
Superior to the Guard, the Navy does at least speak the same language. And before long, we were escorted to the section of the ship that had been claimed by the Deathwatch Marines. The apothecary, who'd traded his damaged power armor for blue and gold comet-embroidered Medicae robes, greeted us at the door. The Marine obviously wasn't overjoyed to find us on his doorstep, asking if we could crash on the equivalent of his couch for a few weeks. We'd apparently earned some respect from him and his team during the battle, because he let us in with no more than a pained sigh and a comment about how monitoring for stowaways does not fall under the purview of the Death Watch. The apothecary directed us towards the quarters which had belonged to the squished inquisitor and his retinue.
Okay.
Told us not to bother him or his patients, and that was it. No request for an explanation or rules about what we could or couldn't do.
There you go.
Just that special brand of apathy that is the hallmark of a good barracks mate.
Yes.
If he'd been a guardsman, we'd have brought him a crate of beer. But since he was a monastic super soldier older than all of us put together, we settled for staying out of his way.
There you go.
We made ourselves comfortable.
They're hanging out with the Death Watch.
Twitch found a comm system and put in a requisition for a staggering amount of explosives, rations, and other supplies from the light cruiser's stores. Nobody else had expected this to work, but since the ship's quartermaster was under the impression that the order was on behalf of the big scary Space Marines, the stuff was actually delivered.
Lovely!
Seeing this, Nubby put in his own requisition for all the money you got, which was met with a bit more skepticism. Sarge barely managed to bluff the quartermaster off without the apothecary finding out, and announced that the next person to even talk to someone from the light cruiser's crew would be sent back to Syssitat's ship. Fully resupplied for the first time in ages, Twitch made a horrible but very secure mess of our new quarters.
Lovely.
As a side note, most of this stuff was left in place when we reached our destination, on account of the Inquisitor's silly 20-kilo limit, and because nobody felt like cleaning it up. An official complaint from the ship's captain caught up with us a few months later, just in time to be used as evidence, in fact, but it was really only a minor side note compared to the rest.
Oh my god.
While Twitch fortified, Nubby and Tink gave our new quarters a thorough looting. Now, the previous occupants having been an inquisitorial team, and possibly a traitorous one at that, there was a fair bit of stuff that could be loosely described as eldritch. Your average inquisitorial team would have gotten excited and started sifting through the stuff in search of intel or whatever. But honestly, when was the last time you heard of digging through a pile of eldritch shit working out well for someone?
Never.
So, per rule number 38 of Greg Sargent's Guide to Not Dying in the Inquisition, we employed the big box of Do Not Touch. If you are unfamiliar with this technique, basically what you do is take a big box, put all the weird stuff in it, and then do not touch it. Very complex.
I know.
Most of the stuff that wasn't boxed found its way into Nubby's grubby pockets.
Of course it did.
The only notable exception being an oversized plasma pistol that went to Tink, which the two of them claimed had belonged to the arrest team's Ogren. Upon seeing the weapon and hearing the explanation, Sarge weighed our need for a heavyish weapon, not to mention how annoying it had been trying to reteach Tink basic lasgun use, against how angry certain people could get. In the end, he decided not to ask any questions he didn't want answers to, such as why no one else had seen this Ogren during or after the warehouse battle, or why anyone would ever give an Ogren such a notoriously finicky weapon, or
Oh my
why
God.
property of the Lamenter's Space Marine chapter was stamped along the pistol's side.
Mike,
After the cleaning and fortifying, we settled into a nice, comfortable routine that mostly consisted of naps, PT, gear maintenance, a few personal projects, and more naps. Twitch and Nubby did their best to keep out of trouble, and carefully planned out what supplies would be brought with us when we eventually arrived. Tink spent most of his spare time reconfiguring his oversized plasma pistol into something that could be used by someone with normal-sized hands, and putting together replacements for his Tau Tech toys. Sarge, along with being generally sergeanty, waited a few days for tempers to cool, then started making regular visits to Sysitat's ship to see how things were going. Most of the visits consisted of him just being told that there still wasn't anything he needed to know and to go away. But he was occasionally given little tidbits of nearly useless information, such as the fact that our destination was some shithole of a hive world,
oh, lovely.
that Oak still hadn't been caught, and someone or other had finally noticed the squished interrogator was missing.
Huh.
Sarge reciprocated by dumping the big box of Do Not Touch in Sysitat's airlock. He was not thanked for this.
Of course he's not.
The odd man out in all of this was Doc. Instead of relaxing while he had the chance, like a proper guardsman, the medic went and practically begged the apothecary to let him assist in the treatment of Sergeant Gravis and the wounded Deathwatch Marines. Doc must have earned some actual respect from the Astartes for keeping Gravis alive. Or maybe his display of fanboyism was just too much to ignore, because the apothecary eventually accepted,
honestly.
And our medic was temporarily promoted to volunteer nurse and janitor. He was also made to swear this oath not to ever talk about any of the fancy pants medical procedures he assisted in, which we were all thankful for, since it spared the rest of us a whole lot of disgusting medical stories. But he was allowed to update us on the status of the 3 Space Marine patients.
That's good, at
According
least.
to Doc, Hart and Grumpy were out of stasis and being kept in an induced coma. Between them, they were going to need 4 augmetics, a dozen replacement organs, 100 hours of bone realignment surgery, and a few months of bed rest, but were expected to make a more or less full recovery. Sergeant Gravis was obviously in worse shape, but had at least been cleared of the Tyranid biotoxin by some Space Marine technomagic, and had finally been removed from his damaged power armor. Doc said the apothecary wasn't quite sure if he'd be returning to duty, mentioning something about Gravis's chapter being undersupplied, but had started installing neural links for some type of specialized full-body augmetic anyway. We figured that sounded like as good an ending for him as was possible, though we were still a little unclear on what sort of augmetic a sarcophagus was. Anyway, asking about the Space Marines was the
Gravis is going in a dreadnought, and we all know it. Thank you, Aquila. Aquila says, "Woo! Look at our boy Doc go!" Doc has been hitting it out of the park, to be honest. He's the one member of the party that's been doing extremely, extremely well for himself. He hasn't been killed. He is dating a hospitalier. He is respected for his, determination by the Astartes. And yeah, he's doing fairly well for himself. And because of him, Gravis has survived so he can be refurbished into a dreadnought. Doc is doing fairly well for himself. Thank you, Slacker. Slacker says, Death, death, traitors, death to the false emperor. Sigismund, congratulations! You volunteered to become my new sword bearer. And he proceeds to lose only 2 fights. Yeah. Did he even lose those 2 fights? Like, wait, let's see. He fought against Karn, and Dorn stepped in before he could really start losing that fight. He did lose the fight to Sevatar. Technically, yeah, he did lose the fight to Sevatar. And he fought Fulgrim. And then Fulgrim, before Fulgrim could kill him, Dorn stepped in. So who would be the other person that he fought and legitimately lost to? Because I don't think Fulgrim would count. They didn't fight for long enough for it to be an actual thing. When Dorn stepped in, he pretty much pimp slapped the ever-living shit out of Fulgrim. In any case, thank you, Slacker. I appreciate it. I think the only person that Sigismund ever truly lost to, in terms of, like, there's no coming back from it, was Sevatar. And he was losing the fight against Karn. And he would have lost the fight against Fulgrim, no ifs, ands, or buts.
Closest thing to
Thank
what
you,
most
Slacker.
of us
I appreciate
did
it,
on the
bud.
trip.
I really do.
We were all in a pretty good mood when the light cruiser finally reached our destination, and we made our way back to Syssitat's ship. Thankfully, it only took a single day of cramped normal space travel to reach orbit over our destination, the hive world Harlock's Wager. Or, to use its full name, Joseph Harlock Sucks at Cards. We were advised...
Somebody lost at a hand of poker.
advised not to discuss the planet's name or the names of its primary hives with the locals. It was, apparently, a touchy subject. Upon reaching orbit, we were subjected to the most wonderful of experiences. A customs inspection, which explained all the stuff about what we could or couldn't bring, even if it didn't explain why the Inquisitor hadn't just told us the reason beforehand. Maybe he didn't want us trying to solve the problem ourselves. Anyway, on a normal mission, the Inquisitor would have flashed his rosette, and that would have been that.
Yes.
But Syssitat apparently felt that wasn't discreet enough. By the time we'd hit orbit, he and his minions had done some sort of cogitator stuff to convince the locals that our ship belonged to a local asteroid mining syndicate.
Okay.
And even dug out some business suits and scribe robes for everyone but us to wear. We were just given little insignias to put on our armor, and asked not to accidentally kill any inspectors. Between all that and some gentle psychic manipulation from Face and Snitch, the inspection went off without any significant hitches.
Thomas, you named your army
Though
after
there
this world?
were an awkward few minutes when they insisted on going through the pile of stuff Nubby had brought back from the light cruiser. Luckily, there weren't any laws against having a bunch of second-hand small valuables and expensive clothing, mostly of the feminine variety, and while there probably was one against ripping an all-in-one kitchen and laundry unit out of one's quarters on an Imperial Navy vessel, transporting it was entirely legal. Once the inspectors were packed away, there was another day of cogitator stuff and meetings, and then we were handed our orders, packed aboard a shuttle, and sent down to do some inquisiting. Well, it wasn't so much inquisiting as sitting around in a van. See, the Inquisitor's investigative techniques hadn't changed since his promotion. He still sat around on his ship with his precious cogitators, pouring through data gathered by his psychers, spy toys, and socialite minions, until some clue or other caught his attention, and he sent out his sneakier henchmen. Our role in this was that of emergency armed backup. Emergency, in this case, meaning that they'd tried literally everything short of an exterminatus. Every
Probably
morning,
an
4
exterminatus.
vehicles would exit the mid-level hab block, which served as our home base. The first was the scan van, holding Snitch, the tech priest, and all their spy toys, and typically piloted by the cleric. Then there was a pair of sporty little anti-grav vehicles which Face and the interrogator used to get to whatever up-hive social event they were nosing around that day. The final vehicle was an acid-stained junker of a van bearing the logo of a Soylent's Viridian's collection service, which had apparently been sold after its cooling system failed while hauling a full load, and was occupied by 5 extremely grumpy guardsmen. These elevated grumpiness levels had more to do with our assignment than the deliberate shittiness of our vehicle. It wasn't that we particularly minded being relegated to backup, and we were only moderately unhappy about the fact that we still hadn't been told what the actual mission was. After all, it wasn't like we wanted to go out there and do all the cloak and dagger nonsense ourselves. No. The thing that had our collective panties in a twist was that we were expected to spend about 12 hours a day driving a ground vehicle around a hive city. Unless you've actually been in a hive, it's impossible to truly understand how unpleasant navigating one via a ground vehicle is. If you want a general idea, though, take the messiest, worst designed, most overloaded traffic system you've ever encountered, and then make it 3-dimensional. Fill any gaps with poisonous smog, and finally, populate it with the most aggressive idiots this side of an orcish war band. Just navigating the place was a miserable experience.
Yep.
When you factored in our van's lack of seats, air conditioning, or proper filtration systems, it got downright hellish. Of course, hellish conditions are part of a guardsman's job description.
I really, really don't think they should be out there right now. Like, I just think that Inquisitor is being a dick for the sake of being a dick. Because the sheer fact of the matter is, if he does need backup, they're going to be too busy trying to get back to them. It's ridiculous. If you want to know that didn't explain it nearly as well as I would have liked. If you want to think about a hive road system, what you do is you get a whole bunch of Lego blocks and start building towers out of them. And then you go cook an entire thing of angel hair spaghetti until the noodles are really loose. Then you pour the angel hair spaghetti on top of the Lego blocks, and the Lego spaghetti is your road system. There you go.
So we suffered through nearly 2 weeks of automotive torture with no more than a moderate amount of bitching. Day after day, we followed that damned scan van around at a distance of no more than 600 and no less than 400 meters, idly noting the way other drivers subconsciously made way for it, but not us, and how carjackers and other such bottom feeders always ignored the immaculate vehicle in favor of our obviously worthless van. Then, every night, we were summoned into the evening holo conference with the Inquisitor to report that we'd done nothing but sit in a van all day and futilely request actual bloody seats for our vehicle. The requests were rejected, of course, as were our ones for actual intel on what the mission was, and orders that had an actual point aside from just pissing us off. And we were then kicked out of the meeting before operational security could be compromised by us overhearing the rest of the team's reports or the Inquisitor's brilliant fucking deductions. So, what amounted to our day job sucked. It was uncomfortable, stressful, and as far as we could tell, completely pointless.
Pretty much.
Seriously, it wasn't like the team was even doing any real missions. They were just sifting for data and were far better equipped to get themselves out of trouble than we were. 5 heavily armed guardsmen opening up on an over-enthusiastic carjacker, or launching an armed exoskeleton into an up-hive fancy dress party for that matter, is the sort of thing that hostile Inquisition types notice. And as we were repeatedly reminded by our boss, being noticed would be a bad thing.
Right.
Honestly, it felt like every aspect of our assignment was purposely designed to piss us off.
It sounds like it.
Except, we were pretty sure that the Inquisitor didn't actually care enough about us to rearrange the whole mission just to spite us. Well, except for the shittiness of the van. That had to have been his idea.
Yeah.
Or the tech priests.
Probably
we decided
the
to split the
Inquisitor.
difference and just hate them both.
There you go.
But not as much as we hated the van itself.
Good.
Not that our time outside the van was any better.
Aquila says, and thank you, Aquila, Sisitat is Eldrad in disguise. Dickishness supreme. Yeah, this is unnecessarily dickish right now.
The
Thank you,
Inquisitor
Aquila.
had decided that we would have to be as the sharks swimming in the sea of humanity, moving silently lest the ripples of our passage forewarn our prey. Which apparently meant that instead of a nice, securable warehouse or office complex or luxury apartment,
Right.
we'd be making our base in the middle of a bloody hab block. Sarge had lodged a protest, citing the impossibility of properly securing a base
Oh my
surrounded on
God.
6 sides by civvies without everyone and their mother noticing. This just earned him a lecture on how futile mere physical defenses were, as well as a reminder that absolutely no defensive explosives were to be used in our security measures.
Twitch is going to have an aneurysm.
The ensuing argument about whether we'd been justified in blowing an entire floor of one of the Inquisitor's previous bases to shrapnel, along with the hostile hit squad that had been on it, got Sarge ejected from the briefing. So the entire ground team wound up crammed into a handful of adjacent habs, halfway up a lower middle hive block,
Oh my
full of
God.
manufactorum workers, administratum scribes, and far, far too many nosy kids. We secured the half of the base which we were assigned as best as we could without a proper killing field, and left the rest of the team to handle their own security. The problem of blending in was similarly divided. The Inquisitor's minions procured a wide range of disguises, complete with falsified documents inserted into the local administratum databases.
Beat this guy with a trout. Beat him to death with a trout, please.
And perfect local accents. We just tacked our old guard insignias back on and told anyone who asked that we were on leave, and threatened to shoot them if they kept asking stupid questions. The rest of the team claimed this was unprofessional and going to get us killed along with you idiots, but failed to provide a better alternative. Anyway, the point is that our base was cramped, insecure, surrounded by non-guardsmen, and filled with teammates that we hated more with each passing day.
Because they're
And
stupid.
despite all that, it was still better than driving around in that bloody van. Really, when you get down to it, still populated, Hive City is just about the worst place for a squad of guardsmen. And it was a minor miracle that we made it as long as we did before things started to fall apart.
Right.
It started with
We already know.
getting permanently relieved from driving duty due to a small incident involving a lack of merging room, an especially belligerent trucker, and Tink's oversized plasma pistol. Luckily, Doc was able to spoil Tink's.
Seriously? Thing just popped off on the freeway. Oh my God. Thank you, Slacker. Delvaris tries to kill Lotaro. The world leaders took that personally. Karn, why am I only hearing about this after his punishment is done with? Hang on. I seriously think that we need to get Slacker a couple of, at least one comic artist so he can do these panels. Because, Angron, why do I never hear about these things? Angron didn't hear about those things because he was a fucking sociopath. That'd be the best way I could actually describe it. He was insane. Oh my god. Like, the world eaters... If you don't know, Latara is my spirit animal. She is my waifu for 40k, and that's because she's absolutely bloodthirsty. Absolutely bloodthirsty and full of impotent rage. Yeah, my boy sat there and popped off when he's not my boy. What am I talking about? I've been wanting to airlock him since he was introduced. He popped off with a plasma pistol in rush hour traffic in the hive. That's wonderful. Thank you, Slacker. I love this.
Shot, and Sarge was able to convince the traffic cops that A, there was nothing sinister about a van full of heavily armed men, because B, we were obviously just a bunch of guardsmen on leave, and therefore C, Tink's behavior was a matter for internal guard discipline. Have a nice day, officers. Here's a little something for your trouble. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Please don't tell our CO. So it really was just a minor incident with no significant impact on the investigation.
Night Lord
and therefore, not worth actually reporting to any of the very busy people on the other half of the team. Unfortunately, the police network was one of the ones being monitored by the scan van.
Lovely.
And the interrogator, who was officially the ground team leader, even though Sarge had a month or two seniority on her bitchy ass, didn't see it this way. We survived the ensuing lectures without murdering any teammates, though Snitch's fun habit of loudly repeating everything we were thinking made it a close thing. Further flack was then earned the following evening, when after our 5th request for vehicle upgrades was rejected out of hand, we decided to pay an after-hours visit to a recycling shop that Nubby had spotted. We exchanged...
It's a chop shop.
Exchanged some second-hand Imperial Navy cabin appliances for a set of totally not blood-stained seats and an air conditioning unit, and even got a sweet, heavily armed buyer's discount. We managed to get the parts back to base without any significant problems, but only got halfway through installing the stuff before the crazy tech priest busted in, declared our upgrades to be an abomination in the eyes of the Omnissiah, and started ripping everything back out.
God damn it!
Tink and Twitch both lobbied hard for just killing the Cogboy and blaming it on Underhive mutants or something.
Do it.
But unfortunately, he wasn't alone, and even more unfortunately, the man with him was Snitch. He called the rest of the team in and gleefully reported our murderous thoughts. Yet another painful lecture from the interrogator followed, with our more annoying teammates chiming in to point out how useless, counterproductive, heretical, and generally incompetent we were. This was a bit more than even Doc and Sarge could put up with, and things devolved into a pointless shouting match that only wound down when both the upstairs and downstairs neighbors started banging on the floor/ceiling and threatening to call the police.
Call the cops, I don't fucking care.
A very tense affair. The high point being a private meeting between Sarge, the interrogator, and the inquisitor, which had involved a lot of yelling and detailed explanations of how unpleasant things would be for us if our shenanigans fouled up the mission. Sarge came back from that in an impressively foul mood, and was actually the one to lead us through round N+1 of the "can we get away with deserting" debate. Several ideas, most of which seemed to hinge on guys that Nubby knew, were put forth, along with some rather...
How does Nubby always know these people? He just arrived on this world. How does he know so many fucking people?
For the top suggestions involving what could be left as a goodbye present for our teammates. But in the end, cooler heads prevailed. It was agreed that in the morning, the majority of us would go and actually apologize to the interrogator and see if Doc's idea to try buttering her up instead of Sysitat would secure us some better working conditions. Then, at around 3 in the morning, Twitch shot the interrogator's dog. Well.
Oh my god.
It wasn't like it was actually a real dog. It was just a cybermastiff. Those things have more in common with a toaster than an actual animal. And she had 6 of the stupid things. Well, 5. But anyway, it wasn't like she didn't have a few to spare. And Twitch had told her to stop having them patrol near our side of the perimeter. It wasn't that we minded having a bunch of animalistic, murderous machines which only answered to a woman who hated us nosing around our quarters while we slept. No siree. It was just that the damned things had no sense of self-preservation and would walk right into Twitch's traps unless specifically ordered not to. And while none of the stuff we'd been allowed to set up was lethal in and of itself, all of us had pretty violent knee-jerk reactions to the sound of a motion sensor alarm going off in the middle of the night.
Right.
Really, it had just been a matter of time, and we'd told her frequently, with demonstrations. For some reason, she didn't appreciate it when we pointed that out to her over the smoking remains of Cybermastiff F1D0, or whatever she'd named the stupid thing. Maybe it was the way Twitch kept yelling, "I told you so!" Anyway, that was the final straw.
Alright, Obsidian, you have a nice night, bud.
The interrogator claimed it had been deliberate. Sarge told her she was being delusional. The tech priest suggested having us all killed. Tink said he could fucking try. Several hands started drifting towards weapons, and things might have gone very poorly if the Inquisitor hadn't chosen that exact moment to call and tell us that he'd cracked the code.
Oh, God.
It wasn't entirely coincidence, mind you. A few of the interrogator's saner teammates had decided to call a higher authority before things turned into a bloodbath. Sysitat had pretty much said, "That's nice, now let me tell you why I'm a genius," and calmed the rest of the team so they could hear too. He didn't feel any need to include us in the call, though.
Of course.
So we just had to sit there and piece together what was going on based on what we could overhear and people's responses. As far as we could tell, the Inquisitor had found something surprising in all the data his minions had been sending him. So surprising, in fact, that it called for a complete change of mission objective. To what, and from what for that matter, was a mystery to us, because Emperor forbid anyone tell the stupid Guardsmen anything.
Right.
But it was apparently important and time-sensitive enough to push the whole shot dog thing onto the back burner. Everyone started running around, and after a short whispered conversation with her boss, the interrogator stalked away with an even grumpier than usual expression, leaving Face to relay us orders, but not any explanations.
Of course.
We decided to take what we could get and started gearing up for action. 3 hours later, we were edging our shitty van through traffic towards some sort of lower mid-hive office complex. As usual, we had absolutely no idea what was actually going on, only that Face, the assassin, and the interrogator would be inserting from some upper tier, and that we were supposed to park outside the 247th floor service entrance along with the scan van. Given the lack of intel, we assumed that we were just there for the usual emergency backup duties.
And see, isn't this the same problem they ran into last time, where the Inquisitor didn't tell them anything, so they eventually just started trying to figure out the best way to accomplish the mission on their own, and that led to everything going, like, completely wrong? That was the Inquisitor's fault, because he doesn't know how to manage a team.
Because if the Inquisitor actually wanted us to do something useful, he'd at least have given us a map of the building. At least that's what Doc had suggested. Sarge thought he was being overly optimistic, and Twitch maintained that it was all a plot by our teammates to get us messily killed.
Probably.
Our van, not being equipped with anti-grav or the ability to psychically influence other drivers, was the last to reach the building.
Like, it's the absolute last thing you want to do with a whole bunch of people who are used to knowing at least the relative the outline of the mission and what they're trying to accomplish. But when you don't tell, like, the only thing that people are gonna assume if you don't keep them informed is that you're an idiot and you're going to get them killed.
and arrived just in time to watch the scan van slide into the last available parking spot. After a futile search for anyone that looked ready to pull out, bribable, or threatenable, Sarge reported that we were out of position and asked permission to either search elsewhere or dump the rest of us on the curb. The request was denied.
Of course.
The Inquisitor told the rest of the team to start the op without us, and Sarge started swearing under his breath as he reached the edge of the building and realized there was no way to turn around before crossing the skyway to the next subspire.
Lovely.
15 minutes to highly illegal footpath crossing U-turns, a faked engine failure, and a whole lot of profanity, not to mention death threats, from both us and other drivers, a spot was found. Admittedly, it was a small spot, and was labeled Administratum Courier Vehicles Only, and was technically occupied, but we figured the owner of the little bike thing wouldn't mind us relocating it to somewhere more efficient, such as the bed of the pickup, 3 spots down from it. Nutty managed to back our 3-meter wide van into the 2.5-meter wide spot with only minor damage to the vehicles on either side.
Okay. I'm going to take a short break on that one because this is getting ridiculous. And, well, it's past ridiculous at this point, and they're about to do something ridiculous. Let's all, get everybody get up, because we've been at this for almost 2 hours now. Everybody get up, take a short breather. We'll be back in about 5 minutes, okay? Yes, Thomas. Yes. All right. Ow. Oh, my God. Get up, move around, feel the air, go over your skin. It is hot. Oh my God. Oh, unending screaming rats. Rum and coke for everyone. Let's see. It can always get worse. Yes, it can. it can always get worse, and good times rhymes with work rhymes. Just so you guys know, I went and checked the thermostat just now. It is 80 degrees in the kitchen of my place, where we still have an air conditioner running. Oh my God, it's hot. Yeah. So, what have we learned? Well, we've learned that no matter what we believe, it can always get worse. It is continuing to get worse. And this Inquisitor is about to get everyone killed. Bar none, he's either going to get everyone killed, or the Guardsmen are going to step up and try to do something, and the Inquisitor is going to basically say they hate them. It's oh God. Being ex-military, I listen to this story and I'm just like, this is the exact kind of officer you don't want to have. The one that thinks they know everyone. That thinks that they know. Oh my God, it's so annoying. But how warm is it outside my place right now? Oh my God. Okay, that's wonderful. All right, so the reason it's so warm in here is probably about 90 in where I'm sitting right now. But I have this nice pack of mixed vegetables, which I'm using to cool myself. Yeah, God, it's ridiculous. Okay, so who's ready to get back started again? Are we prepared to see how this is about to go hilariously tits up? And most likely thanks to the Inquisitor himself. Because the Inquisitor is a douchebag. In summer it gets regularly above 30 degrees. Yeah. In your room, Darius, yeah, like we actually have, we have 3 window units where we live. One of them has a habit of freezing, and that's the one in our bedroom, but it does a good job. Generally, if we can run all 3, it does a good job. I shut down the one in here anytime I record, anytime I stream, stuff like that. Just to constantly, kind of keep the temperature down. I actually like the winter here, as far as to record and stuff like that, because I can always fix things if it gets colder. When it gets warmer, it just legitimately, when it gets hotter, it just legitimately gets harder to do anything, because you're just sitting in a swelter, and it's just not fun. Let's see. Michael, exactly, Michael. Michael said, if you don't want people to do something stupid, tell them the plan so they can stay out of the way. This is the thing that the Inquisitor did last time that got them screwed all over. In any case, let's get started again, guys. Here we go.
And Sarge triumphantly informed Syssitat that we were in position. While the Inquisitor made sarcastic comments about how long it had taken, we checked our comms, readied our weapons, and all suffered minor heart attacks as what sounded like a small battering ram slammed into the van's rear door.
Lovely.
Sarge swore and thanked the Emperor for weapons safeties, as the blow was followed up by 2 more and a bellowed order to come out or face the wrath of the Jack Hive Traffic Authority. He took a breath, mustered the coolest face possible while wearing a guard issue helmet, and cracked open the van's rear door.
Thank you, Slacker. Slacker, the Night Lord's warband disregards Conrad's order and fracks about, and Sevator says, and they learn not to do that again. And as far as the tower fan, they're generally quieter. Yes, they actually are. The problem is not the air conditioning unit, anything like that. The problem is my microphone, because it is, like, I've actually built a box around it, but at the same time it's an omnidirectional microphone, so it picks up sound from legitimately everywhere. So right now you're hearing me, you're also hearing, like, the slight hum in the back is my computer tower, which is sitting right there, and, like, let me just turn it on so y'all can hear. Hold on a second. That's the AC. It's rather loud. But there's nothing I can do about that, not for now. I'm going to turn that off. There we go. Let that die off. Kaboom. Thanks, Slack. I really do appreciate it. What I'm looking forward to is when we do get, me and the hospital do get into a house, or when it cools down out here, because it's August, so the temperature is going to start coming down in the next few months. I won't have this problem. But it hasn't really been a problem until legitimately August. And, yeah. Yes, Hive City ambience. Oh, don't worry about me, guys. Don't worry about me. Trust me. I'd much rather have that off. I'm picky about certain things. In any case, here we go.
Problem, officer? Deep in the bowels of the inquisitorial headquarters on Holy Terra, there is an archive maintained by the scribes of the Ordo Scriptus. In this archive, the most heroic victories, valiant defeats, and horrible sacrifices made by the agents of the Inquisition are recorded. So that even if the Imperium it protects may never learn of them, the greatest moments in inquisitorial history are not forgotten.
Right.
Our argument about hive parking regulations with the traffic officer, a mere dozen meters from where our teammates were engaged in a covert operation vital to the stability of the Imperium, was not one of those moments.
Of course not.
It wasn't like we had any other options, though. There were no other spots. Leaving our post mid-mission would never fly with the Inquisitor.
Right.
And as attractive as the idea of just shooting the man was, we were pretty sure that publicly gunning down a police officer would be considered blowing our cover.
Right.
So, violence and retreat not being options, we fell back on our wits, words, and Sarge's charming demeanor.
Uh-huh.
Needless to say, it went poorly.
Right.
Now, just to be clear, Sarge's diplomatic abilities weren't the problem.
No.
In fact, he did far better than any of us had expected, which is to say that he made it through the whole ordeal without accidentally confessing to any major crimes,
There we go.
revealing our mission, or assaulting the man. The diplomacy adept would have been proud. Anyway, the main problem was that this traffic officer was the most relentless, pedantic, self-righteous bastard we'd ever encountered, which is really saying something when you work for the Inquisition. The man just stood there, completely implacable in his enforcement of Jack Hive traffic ordinances, picking apart every excuse, ignoring every appeal, and dispensing a near endless stream of tickets from his servo-skull assistant. Sarge suffered through 20 minutes of that hell. Not out of any sort of idiotic stubbornness, but because every time he tried to shut up and take his ticket, the officer reached for his comm to call a tow vehicle. It was a simple choice between abandoning his post or keeping the argument going. So Sarge did his duty and repeatedly crammed his foot into his mouth. Well, not literally. He was just sort of hanging out of the smallest possible crack in the van's rear doors, desperately trying to hide the fact that he and everyone else in the vehicle were carrying highly illegal weapons, while he babbled for time. But figuratively, well, by the end, he was practically shitting toes. Of course, the rest of us didn't want to leave Sarge out to hang, but violence wasn't an option, and it was all we were good at. Nubby did volunteer to trade places with Sarge, but that was shot down for obvious reasons.
Please,
Twitch
for
and
the love of
Tank
God.
also made some suggestions that involved sneaking out and creating a distraction.
That would be
Unfortunately,
worse.
the only door that wasn't wedged closed by the surrounding vehicles was the one Sarge occupied, and busting out the windshield didn't seem very sneaky.
No, it doesn't.
Doc's more practical idea to call for help from our team, or at least get permission to fall back, didn't work out any better. Whether they were actually busy, or were just being asses, were unclear. But our teammates in the scan van claimed they had better things to do than help us get out of a parking ticket, and the Inquisitor just told Doc to get off the shared comm channel. In retrospect, he probably should have described the problem as a potential hostile agent, or arbiter, or anything other than a traffic cop, really. So, lacking anything useful to do, the rest of us just sat there, listening to the rest of the team's comm chatter, and praying to the Emperor that one of them would screw up.
Right.
And the death of the Imperium's most annoying traffic officer could be put down as acceptable collateral damage.
Yes.
That didn't happen, though, which was probably a good thing, given how important the information our teammates extracted turned out to be.
Has anybody else besides me been pulled over by a cop that they're pretty much certain was trying to get them to throw a punch? I had that happen one time. I got pulled over by the state trooper because I was smoking a cigarette and I flicked it out on the highway, and he literally ran me down like I had just shot the president. And then he proceeded to legitimately, like at every single turn, do his dead level best to be as confrontational as possible. Just absolutely 100% balls to the walls angry. That was until he found out that I was actually a local, and I wasn't, because I had different state plates on the back of my vehicle. He found out that I had actually moved there a week ago, and that I'd be in the court, and this dash cam would be brought up as evidence because it was so outrageous. And the guy he was spoiling for a reason to arrest somebody. It was so ridiculous. It was absolutely insane. But, yeah. I'm getting flashbacks of that guy with this guy.
Anyway, by the time word finally came down that the objective had been completed and it was time to pull out, Sarge's 20-minute argument with the officer netted us citations for parking in a restricted area, failing to vacate in a timely manner, operating a commercial vehicle without a permit, impersonating a commercial vehicle, failing to vacate in a timely manner, operating an administratum courier without a permit, impersonating an administratum courier vehicle, failing to vacate in a timely manner, tampering with an administratum courier vehicle, loading or unloading a vehicle in a no-loading zone, failing to vacate in a timely manner, attempting to bribe a traffic officer, attempting to threaten a traffic officer, and failing to vacate in a timely manner.
Diclonius, if you had been 10 instead of 9, you would have been sent to juvie for drug possession because you had a fucking Benadryl? Oh my god.
The whole thing was thoroughly humiliating. Ended with a total fine of over 1,200 thrones, as well as 3 separate court summons.
Lovely.
And since we were never actually called on to do anything, was completely pointless.
Right.
That said, though, we managed to maintain our position without actually being arrested or starting a shooting war with the local authorities.
That's a good
Though, admittedly,
thing.
Things got pretty close near the end there. So we were willing to call it a moral victory.
Mm-hmm.
Mind you, the Inquisitor and his minions didn't see it that way.
Of course they didn't.
Fortunately, they were a little too caught up discussing the data they'd extracted to do more than make a few sarcastic comments. By the time we finally escaped the avatar of traffic ordinances, the second he'd realized Sarge was pulling out, all that vacating in a timely manner stuff had gone out the window, and the bastard had started dragging his feet with a sort of grim, vindictive glee. The rest of the team had finished pulling out, held one of their no guardsmen allowed meetings, determined that someone was somewhere, and had all started heading off towards some place in the upper hive.
Mm-hmm.
We knew this because every 5 minutes or so the Inquisitor calmed us to ask why we hadn't left yet. Sarge wisely removed his comm bead and put Doc in charge of talking to the man.
There you go.
It took us 3 hours of driving to climb above the smog layer. through the middle levels, and into the relatively low section of the upper hive where whoever we were chasing was. This was longer than the Inquisitor wanted it to take.
Of course
but
it was.
At least gave Sarge some time to calm down. And after the first hour, we were able to ditch the rebreathers, so it was actually relatively pleasant. In fact, we made it the whole way without encountering any serious traffic problems, or even seeing a single cop, which was great for both our nerves and their continued survival, but probably should have stuck us as a little odd.
Yes.
Anyway, everything was uneventful and relaxing, right up until we were about 2 kilometers from our destination, which turned out to be a chapel dedicated to some local saint. It wasn't the largest place, at least by hive standards, but whoever Castor the Obviate was, the locals at least thought he raided his own subspire, with a shuttle port and road connected to boot. We were in the middle of trying to figure out how best to get to said skyway from our exit when the mission's timetable abruptly accelerated. From what we'd overheard on the comms, our teammates were more or less in position to launch an infiltration of the ecclesiarchy-only sections of the chapel. As usual, we had absolutely no idea why they were doing this, only that it involved some guy who was hiding there. Who he was, what he looked like, and whether the end goal was to kidnap, interrogate, kill, or bake a cake for the sucker was completely unclear. Apparently, it wasn't something we needed to know. The same went for what our role in this operation was, and why in the Emperor's name they were delaying everything to wait for us. But that turned out to be a moot point, since the mission went off the rails before we even got there.
Lovely.
Everyone but us was more or less in position. The scan van was parked outside. Face and the interrogator were already inside one of the chapel's public areas. The cleric was chatting up a fellow fanatic near a service entrance.
Welcome back,
and
Burp.
the assassin was being all assassiny on the roof. Then the tech priest noticed a sudden increase in encrypted Vox traffic.
Lovely.
And Snitch sensed several hostile minds entering the area. This was followed by Face announcing that a pair of local secret police types moving towards the target. The cleric and assassin reporting that their entrances were now blocked, and the interrogator loudly blaming it all on us
of course
for taking so long to get there. Tink responded by pointing out that we hadn't asked them to wait for us, and followed it up by some choice comments about her personality and parentage, which she reciprocated. Sarge made a half-hearted attempt to shut Tink up, but was beat to it by the Inquisitor, who cut both their comms and started belting out an impressive stream of orders, of which ours were, get into position right now, or by the Emperor, I will make sure you incompetents die before I do. As tempting as it was to take our damned time, there's nothing quite like an Inquisitor issuing orders in a tone of suppressed terror to motivate a cooperative attitude.
Yeah.
Nubby, whose lack of scruples made up for his...
Oh, this is perfect. This is so they say nothing. You only say anything to the people that are heavily armed supports when you're shitting your pants. This is bad.
Inability to see all the way over the dashboard and was already in the seat in any case, put the metal to the pedal to the other metal, and started weaving through traffic like he had a Tau hover tank on his ass while Sarge navigated. Speed limits and lane markers were ignored. Signs and lights were treated as amusing suggestions, and anything smaller than us was trusted to look out for itself. Or in the case of one of those administratum couriers, wind up clinging to our hood and screaming in a most unhelpful manner until Sarge pried them off. Between our obvious willingness to trade hits, superior guardsmanly reflexes, and a whole lot of luck, we made it to the Skyway in under 5 minutes.
Nice.
Only to discover that the road to the chapel was at a complete standstill.
Lovely.
Sarge eyed the jammed lane leading to the chapel, then the nearly empty lane leading from it, and told Nubby to go for it.
Go.
The rest of us gripped onto whatever surfaces we could find and prayed to the Emperor that everyone on the bridge was more chicken than us.
Right.
54 heart-stopping seconds and 3 near misses later, Our shitty van screeched around the secret police vehicle that was in the process of cordoning off the outgoing lane, nearly crushing the officer in the progress, jumped a section of sidewalk, and power slid into the last available spot in front of the chapel's main entrance. Nubby killed the engine with a half-hysterical giggle, Tink helped pull Twitch out from where he'd gotten wedged, and Doc reported our position to the Inquisitor. Sarge slumped back in his seat with a sigh of relief, only to jerk upright as an armored glove slammed against his window, and a horribly familiar growl of a voice asked him if he knew how many traffic laws he'd just violated. The expression.
At this point, I just think Sarge should just take out the Inquisitorial Rosette, hold it up to the window, tell the guy to get in the van, shut the fuck up, or invoke the wrath of the Inquisition. I just really think he should do that.
And on Sarge's face. Well, let's just say he managed to sink his fingers about a centimeter into the dash during the few seconds it took us to rig up a camo tarp to hide the rear of the van from sight. Fortunately, by the time we'd finished and he rolled his window down, he'd regained enough control to limit himself to merely glaring at the officer in an attempt to kill the man via pure, concentrated hatred. As Sarge announced that no, he did not know how many laws he'd broken, but would appreciate being informed in detail by the helpful officer, the rest of us quietly argued about what the hell was going on. It was fairly obvious that the officer had followed us on his hoverbike, but why was less than clear.
He
A
is the
properly
traffic
paranoid
law.
inquisitorial team would have probably assumed he was purposely trying to interfere with our mission. In fact, that's exactly what our teammates said when Doc told them. But we were less sure. For one thing, if the officer was some sort of enemy agent,
He is
or
the
cat's
law.
paw, he should have actually looked like a normal cop. His kit was perfectly regulation, and there really isn't any rule that says a traffic cop can't be a 2-meter, 120-kilo mountain of muscle. But your average cop doesn't practically vibrate with the internal anger of an officer who wants nothing more than to arrest the entire planet, from the lowliest underhive grubber to the planetary governor for not doing it right. Then was the way the actual agent types on the scene reacted. As Sarge began arguing his way into another massive pile of tickets, a pair of those planetary secret police guys, possibly the ones who'd been setting up the roadblock we'd bullied through, came running up, only to freeze in their tracks as they sighted the officer. After a very brief argument, the two of them had lowered their weapons, carefully backed away, and very pointedly went to find something else that needed their attention. Very interesting, that. Or, to put it another way, we'd been in the Inquisition long enough to recognize a monomaniacal fanatic when we were issued a parking ticket by one. Doc, being the current comms bitch, reported our reclassification of the officer from threat to very annoying hazard to the Inquisitor, who responded by yelling at him for kicking up a fuss about it in the first place. Doc took this with good grace, because from the sound of things, it probably wasn't the best time to get snippy.
Right.
Based on what we could overhear on the general channel and see through the rust holes in our van, things weren't going too smoothly for our teammates. There was a lot of chatter about diverting the secret police and the target having run off. The assassin kept asking for directions through air vents. The cleric needed someone to open a door, and the scan van was relaying all sorts of worrying info about incoming reinforcements. Things certainly didn't sound good. But they hadn't degraded to the point where they wanted us involved either.
Right.
So we just sat in our van like good little guardsmen and waited for our orders. Lacking anything else to do, most of us were engaged in Twitch's 6th and 7th favorite pastimes of tracking potential hostiles and planning preemptive strikes.
Okay.
And Sarge stuck his head around the tarp and announced that he needed 2 volunteers to run a quick errand.
Okay.
Volunteers in this case, meaning whoever looked the least likely to get themselves arrested the second they stepped out of the van. since Twitch currently had pinless crack grenades in both hands, and Tink had his goggles on and was resting the tip of his oversized plasma pistol against the section of paneling between him and the traffic officer. The options were limited.
See ya, bloody.
5 minutes later, Doc and Nubby were standing at the top of the chapel stairs, avoiding eye contact with the secret police officers, and trying to figure out just where in that most holy shrine one could get one's parking validated. The officer hadn't even blinked when two men in full guard-issue carapace armor with helmets climbed out of the van, though he did issue Sarge a ticket for being over his vehicle's rated passenger capacity. The crowd of up-hive pilgrims inside the chapel's foyer didn't seem to care much either, being rather more focused on their prayers or all the secret police running around. As for the secret police, after a cursory glance revealed that Doc and Nubby weren't carrying any weapons, they were just ignored with that special flavor of disdain that elite units seem to reserve for those of us who do the real work.
You know, Nubby may seem like the last person you send to not get arrested, but Nubby's done a fantastic job of not getting arrested so far, despite him being sneaky as shit. Despite him being legitimately so shady that you would enjoy sitting underneath the shadow that he casts on a summer's day, he legitimately is the best one for not getting arrested, and I still don't know why that is.
Our teammates, on the other hand, immediately started complaining over the comms about us being out of position and blowing our cover.
Oh my god.
Doc responded by asking if they knew where the parking validation guy was, but didn't get an answer. Doc and Nubby's wandering search for the holy secretary of parking validation was brought to an abrupt end by a shout of, "He's getting away!" from the interrogator, and a pot-bellied man in scribe's robes bolting into the foyer from the corridor. A quick glance.
Thank you, Aquila. Aquila says, Nubby is a petty thief and pretty obvious, so he will only get arrested if the officers have nothing better to do and want a nice bribe. This is absolutely true. Nubby just looks like he's up to no good, and most times they're not going to bother. Like, it's actually a genius move to send Nubby inward to not get arrested. It actually is, because for as much shady shit as he's involved in, and as many times as I've wanted to airlock him, how many times have we seen him actually get arrested or in trouble with the law? Very few. Thank you, Aquila.
Revealed a group
Sarge, on the other hand, the guy can't stay away from him.
Of ecclesiarchy guards following the man, and a pair of secret police moving to cut him off from the main doors, with face hard on their heels. Doc and Nubby shared a glance, then split up. Doc weaving through the crowd towards the ecclesiarchy guards, and Nubby sidling towards the chapel entrance. If the sprinting scribe had been paying any attention, he might have noticed a confused-looking guardsman holding a parking ticket abruptly stepping out into the path of his pursuers, mirroring the lead guard's dodge, and taking the whole group out in a pile of tangled limbs. Or, if he'd been looking to his left, he could have seen a random pilgrim pull a similar maneuver, tripping up two secret police officers, but not the man following them. The scribe didn't see either of these crashes, though. In fact, he was so focused that he didn't even notice when an ugly little man near the chapel doors stuck out an augmetic leg.
Nice.
Well, at least not until his shin bone, weakened by years of malnutrition and pollution-induced illness, shattered like a stick of chalk.
Oh!
As the scribe tumbled forwards, grasping for his leg instead of reaching out to break his fall, Nubby's grubby little hands missed the man's upper arm entirely, settling on one of the augmetic cables coming out of his head instead.
Oh, God.
The short trooper's powerful backward lunge, intended to spin a significantly larger man off to the side and out of sight of pursuers, ripped the cable right out of the scribe's skull and launched both it and Nubby a full 2 meters into the air. On the plus side, this gave him an excellent view as the scribes tumbled through the chapel doors, sliding across the polished marble landing, and sailed right over the edge of the stairs. Sarge and the traffic officer both turned to watch as a screaming figure in scribe's robes crashed down 7 flights of stairs,
Oh my
scattering
God.
pilgrims and finally crashing in a twitching, bleeding heap directly in front of the officer, who, after a second's consideration, issued the man a ticket for obstructing a public walkway. Nubby's embarrassed oops.
That's awesome. He watched him fall down 7 flights of stairs, then gave him the ticket when he didn't get up. Oh my God, I love the Imperium.
Echoed for a second over the dead silent comm channel. Then the yelling started. Left to his own devices, Sarge would have been hard-pressed to decide whether to laugh, cry, or dash up the stairs to strangle Nubby with his bare hands. But he only had a limited amount of time, and the Inquisitor was issuing some very suboptimal orders. Sysitat wanted us to throw the nearly dead scribe in our van and run for it, but Sarge had eyes on at least a dozen heavily armed secret police, and was very aware of the differences between our shitty van and an APC.
Right.
The only reason said secret police weren't already moving in was the presence of traffic officer. The huge cop wasn't actually doing anything to protect or even help the scribe, but when the first secret police agent showed up, the officer turned a glare of such concentrated hatred on the man that he actually fell over in his haste to back up. A sort of standoff had developed, with the officer standing completely still in the middle of a 7-ish meter ring of curious onlookers, and obviously terrified secret police. Sarge put the question of just what the hell was going on with that out of his mind, and seized his chance while the officer was distracted to relay an interpreted version of the Inquisitor's orders to the rest of us. Operating on the theory that what the Inquisitor actually wanted was a chance to brain scan the scribe before the secret police got to him, Sarge decided that what we'd actually been told to do was secure the man. The fact that the officer's goon-repelling aura was already doing this without any effort on our part was just a happy coincidence. Of course, this left the problem of getting the actual brain scanning done without the secret police noticing, not to mention keeping the nearly dead scribe alive long enough for it to happen. Less stalwart and dutiful men might have decided it wasn't their problem, and dumped the whole brain scanning problem on teammates and superiors.
Right.
But we were above that sort of thing.
Of course you are.
Honestly. Okay, well, maybe not.
No.
But we were pretty sure that any requests for assistance would result in more orders to get ourselves shot doing something stupid. Which is why we decided to just go ahead with our own little plan before anyone had a chance to tell us not to. Step 1 of said plan consisted of Twitch and Tink bailing out of the van while everyone was distracted. Tink jogged up to the chapel to retrieve Doc, who had just finished getting the shit kicked out of him by the 3 chapel guards he tripped up. Of course, since he'd been wearing his armor, the beatdown mostly just resulted in a few broken toes for the kickers, but the medic was still a bit woozy when Tink pried him off the floor. Doc successfully collected, the 2 of them headed back out of the chapel, carefully avoiding the area where Nubby was deflecting any suspicion by loudly complaining about a poor old veteran what had his legs blown off in the war, had been struck by some crazy running person and demanded some sort of reparation from the chapel.
Of course.
Preferably cash. While Doc was being retrieved, Twitch made his way over to where the scan van was parked and asked if Snitch would step outside for a minute. The Psyker and Tech Priest tried to ignore him at first, but Twitch being Twitch, that proved rather difficult. The Demolitions Trooper, who hated crowds, exposed positions, and being anywhere near armed hostiles to start with, and was even less happy about leaving his lasgun and most of his explosives in the van, wasn't in the mood for silly little games, and made that abundantly clear. There's just something about a man on the very edge of a psychotic breakdown banging on your door with a live anti-tank grenade it's impossible to ignore. Back at our van, the standoff between the officer and the secret police gradually intensified as more and more of them arrived and the scribe's condition steadily worsened. Sarge, being very familiar with the...
Imagine being such a dick cop that everybody is fucking terrified of you.
Look of men trying to psych themselves up for a possibly fatal attack, waited until it looked like the secret police were just about to find their spines before stepping in. Right as the tension reached the breaking point, Sarge opened his door, walked up behind the officer, and in his best non-com shout, asked just what in the Emperor's name was going on here. Even expecting it, Sarge only barely ducked the reflexive haymaker from the startled guard, but continued his obviously rehearsed speech without missing a beat. Putting on a show of surprise that wouldn't have fooled the most gullible toddler, Sarge pointed to the mangled scribe and asked what had happened. After a short pause for someone to start answering, Sarge interrupted to point out that the man obviously needed a Medicae, asked why one hadn't been called, and waited again, and then interrupted that answer with a bellow of, "Medic!" Right on cue, Tink shoved a confused and winded Doc out of the crowd. The medic stood there for a second, taking in the full extent of the scribe's injuries, and automatically reached for his concealed sidearm inside of his med kit. He was brought up short by a grunt from Sarge. There was an awkward moment as Doc gave Sarge a "you've got to be kidding" look, and Sarge tried to convey, "start treating this poor bastard before we're all shot," via more grunts and a few head jerks. After a few seconds of this, Tink realized that Doc's comm bead must have been damaged during his beatdown, and the medic had absolutely no idea what was going on. Lacking any better ideas, Tink just yelled at Doc to stop standing around and get to work, which entirely failed to convey all the nuances of our plan. But at least it got the medic moving. Whatever the officer or the secret police thought of the whole charade, neither group seemed willing to intervene, as Doc gave the scribe emergency stimulants, transfusions, and more icky varieties of first aid. This might have been because our amazing acting skill had taken them all in, but it probably had more to do with the fact that Doc's efforts were so obviously futile.
Right.
Seriously, the man's shin bones were coming out his armpits. He looked like a cross between a pretzel and a pancake.
Damn.
Except with a lot more blood. The only thing keeping the scribe alive was a metal skull and a few augmetic internal organs which were already in the process of failing. Of course, once Doc got going, he was the best show in town. There's something horribly fascinating about watching someone trying and generally failing to put a human jigsaw back together. None of the secret police even noticed as Twitch more or less dragged Snitch through the crowd and up to the edge of the circle around Doc and his patient. Not that they would have objected if they'd noticed. Nothing unusual about yet another guardsman and an average-looking pilgrim trying to get a better view. The tricky part...
Inception says prostate exam in the public street. That's what you get for being a fucking traitor.
...was going to be getting the annoying psyker the last few meters and making sure nobody noticed anything warpy. Fortunately, by the time Snitch was in position, Doc had been brought up to speed. Not by Sarge, mind you. After a few increasingly comical attempts to grunt instructions at the medic, the traffic officer ordered him to get back in the van or be arrested on the spot. Tink, on the other hand, decided to check whether Doc's comm bead was really broken, or had just gotten switched to another channel during his beatdown. The fact that the channel it had been switched to turned out to be the one shared with the rest of the team was a bit inconvenient. But most of them were too busy trying to steal something or other without getting shot to do more than call our plan dangerously stupid.
Of course they did.
As soon as he saw Snitch, Doc announced in the voice of medical authority that he needed 3 volunteers to help with his patient. Specifically Snitch, Twitch, and, just for appearances, the queasiest-looking secret policeman he could see.
Nice.
Snitch was told to immobilize the scribe's head. Twitch was ordered to remove what was left of the scribe's robes. The secret policeman, who was practically quivering under the full force of the traffic officer's glare, was just handed a big handful of miscellaneous organs to hold on to. He immediately dropped the liver.
Lovely.
Now, on the big list of cunning inquisitorial gambits, just brain scanning the guy right in front of 24 hostile agents and really hoping hard they wouldn't notice, probably places somewhere near the bottom.
Right.
Afterwards, our teammates, Snitch especially, were all too happy to point out the numerous things that could have gone wrong.
Of course they could.
And what that would have meant for their super important secret mission thing.
Oh, super secret.
That said, though, we pulled it off without a hitch.
Hey!
Well, mostly.
Aw.
Snitch managed to do his thing without accidentally searing a hole in reality, but the scribe finally kicked the bucket about halfway through.
Okay.
When this happened, Snitch began whispering over the shared channel about a copy of the data being stored on some sort of device the scribe was carrying. Twitch began rooting through the wad of bloody clothes he'd ripped off the man, but suddenly found himself looking up the traffic officer's shock mall and being informed that any further rummaging would constitute a Class 7 violation. This, in turn, caught the attention of the secret policeman, who suddenly remembered what his actual job was and tried to take the wad of clothes from Twitch without dropping any of the organs he was still holding.
Right.
Twitch refused to let go, and an awkward tug-of-war began, with neither side willing to actually do anything overt enough to catch the traffic officer's attention. While Twitch and the secret policeman struggled over the scribe's robes, Doc decided to check if any of the dead man's augmetics were the data storage device. This proved to be a bit tricky, since neither he or Snitch knew what the device looked like, and they both had to maintain the fiction that the scribe was still alive, and their rummaging was just an especially invasive method of treatment.
This is ridiculous. This is so stupid. Like, why wouldn't they just tell them?
After a few minutes of this, nothing had been turned up. The secret police around us were getting visibly antsy, and Snitch was making "I really should get back to my armored scan van before these guys shoot me along with you idiots" noises. As the tension mounted, Doc and Twitch tried to make one last attempt to determine whether the data was in the scribe's body or clothes. Tink circled back to the van to grab everyone's weapons. Sarge quietly argued with the Inquisitor over whether to run or fight, and Nubby asked if the thingy looked anything like a data slate connected to a neural interface cable, because he might have, accidentally sort of found something like that. Just now, lying on the ground.
He swiped it from him when he pulled the cable out of his head.
Completely new development.
Completely.
Certainly not something that had been sitting in his pocket for the last 15 minutes.
Right.
Within 20 seconds of Nubby's question over the general channel, the augmetic data slate thingy had been seized by Face and plugged into one of the Inquisitor's data collector devices. Before the upload had even finished, Sysitat announced that it was the information he'd been looking for, and ordered his minions to pull out and leave the Ministorum their copy. He also went on for a bit about him being much smarter than someone or other, and how a head start was more than enough of an advantage for someone of his genius. But we were a little busy trying to get the hell out of there to pay much attention to him.
Right.
Our evac was a fairly orderly one. At Sarge's order over the comms, Twitch abruptly gave up in the tug-of-war over the scribe's robes with the secret policeman, who immediately toppled backwards over the remains of the scribe. As the man picked himself back up, Doc announced that his patient was stable, it being hard to get much more stable than dead, and asked the secret policeman if he could provide a vehicle to transport the scribe to the nearest hospital. After a glance at the traffic officer, who didn't say anything to veto this, the secret policeman accepted and called for a hover van. What was left of the scribe was peeled off the pavement and loaded into the back of the secret police van without incident.
Yes.
Though the traffic officer did issue the vehicle tickets for parking on the sidewalk, loading/unloading in a non-designated area,
Oh my
and
god.
operating without plates or registration.
This is
None of the secret
outstanding.
police seemed inclined to dispute these tickets, and the second the scribe was loaded, the whole lot of them just sort of melted back into the crowd and disappeared. After a few seconds of hesitation, Snitch scampered off as well, leaving just us and the traffic officer, who immediately asked Doc for the validated parking pass. Doc's second quest to find the parking validation office went a bit better than the first one, largely thanks to the fact that Nubby had already talked to the chapel administrator in charge of it as part of his injured veteran routine. The poor woman was willing to do pretty much anything to get him out of the place faster, and even threw in a few vials of holy water, plus a coupon for a free blessing at some shrine on the opposite side of the planet.
Nice!
Our parking validated, Sarge collected our massive
Nubby does have his advantages.
sheaf of tickets, and we drove our shitty van back into Jack Hive proper, with the traffic officer very obviously following us on his hoverbike. It took us 9 hours to lose the traffic officer. 9. The Inquisitor and his minions had time to go back to the base, analyze their precious data, which we certainly weren't thanked for providing, plan the next mission, and even scout out the target location, all while we played cat and mouse with that relentless bastard. We went through just about every trick imaginable, even bribing other vehicles to violate laws in an attempt to draw him off. He just ignored it all, and kept riding our ass like some sort of unstoppable, traffic-oriented angel of vengeance. After 5 hours, we were ready to throw in the towel, but the Inquisitor wouldn't let us. He was all like, blah blah, operational security blah blah, might be a conspiracy agent blah blah,
Blah blah.
and forbade us from going anywhere near the base until we shook him.
I will never come back to
The best part of the whole ordeal was the complete lack of support from our team. For all his talk about the officer being this big threat to security, the most he was actually willing to do to help us was send the man's public record to Tink. Well, this was completely...
Aquila, that is an excellent idea. We just declare the Eye of Terror a no parking zone and send this bastard out there. Abaddon the Despoiler would be ticketed to no end.
useless to us. It did at least explain the reason the man looked like an arbite crammed into a traffic cop uniform. It was that he was one. Specifically, he was the official arbite liaison to the Jack Hive Traffic Patrol, which accounted for his general interest in traffic, if not why he was out issuing tickets and harassing honest guardsmen instead of liaising. Aside from that, all the file said was that he'd been liaising for about a year, had been in the arbite proper for over 50, and held the rank of trooper. This seemed odd, especially since Tink had heard at least one secret policeman refer to him as the judge. But the rest of his record was classified, and the interrogator claimed that hacking into the arbite's databases wasn't worth the risk. Further requests for information and assistance from our team resulted in variations of, "We're busy, deal with your own shit." Anyway, long story short, we had what looked like a disgraced arbite following us. And the only way we managed to shake him was by driving through an active Underhive gang war. Seriously, that's what it took. It was either that or shoot him ourselves. And as attractive as that sounded, we were pretty sure there was a reason those secret police hadn't been willing to try it. So yeah, gang war. It was about the 7-hour mark when Twitch came up with the idea, and by that point we were all so tired of trying to nap in the back of the van that we just went with it. We cruised around the lowest drivable regions of the Hive until Tink picked up chatter about a serious gunfight, and then we just drove right through the middle of it. Repeatedly. Yeah, we got shot at. And yes, they hit the van a few times.
Lovely.
But they were mostly using cheap auto guns, and carapace armor is pretty sturdy stuff.
Oh, there you
So
go.
the worst of the damage was the windshield and Doc's recaf mug.
That sucks.
That was all just casual pot shots and stray bullets, though. The officer, on the other hand, might as well have had a giant neon bullseye painted on his bike. In his defense, he was probably used to going around in arbite gear, which tends to both be sturdier and protected by their penchant for disproportionate responses. After the second lap, he was barely staying in the air, and halfway through the third, someone nailed his forward anti-grav thingy with a hand cannon. We watched him go down and saw what looked like a bunch of kids armed with pipes swarming the landing site.
Oh, good lord.
We decided that was probably as good as we were going to get, and cheesed it. We re-emerged into the more lawful sites of the hive, drunk with victory, and on the lookout for a good breakfast opportunity.
There you go.
Unfortunately, the second we got back into clear comm contact with the Inquisitor, he started yelling at us to head towards the next mission. So, arbiteless, but also pancakeless, we headed towards the bank our teammates were planning to rob.
Wait, what? Oh my god. So we definitely need to recruit this traffic officer because he will do his mission no matter what. No matter how ridiculous, and he is utterly terrifying. He ticketed the gang and is still hunting the team to this day. Seriously, we do need to send him to the Eye of Terror. It's like, attention, War Master! Multiple third parties have indicated you are guilty of the following traffic violations. He just sits there, like, they would never be able to land on Cadia. He would be there, waiting on them, on his little hover bike. Thomas, they said that he's basically, he's basically just a, oh god. Oh my god. So, next week, we'll be checking out the stealth mission, Infiltration. Now, there are only a few more episodes of this. And that's sad. But we're going to be looking at a new series, which makes me happy. So, what I want you to do is, if you have a series in mind, head to the Request for Series tab in the Discord. Head there and put in your request for series. Declonia says, I seriously believe this guy's a member of the Fallen who is repenting for believing Luther. We're the Dark Angels. They land. Asmodai tries to make him repent, and he tickets Asmodai for being in a public space and blocking the traffic line. I can see it. I can definitely see it. Fan plans to upload next Monday. We'll be live streaming that, of course, on probably Tuesday or Wednesday. Most likely Tuesday. So just be aware of that. Let's see. What else? So we're going to... Now, when I mean series, I mean an ongoing series. Something to like this. Something like A Fan with Too Much Time. Something like... of course, text-to-speech, Hunter the Parenting, things like that. That's what I'm looking for as far as a series to do on Saturdays. Now, I might break it up a little bit and do some of the longer videos in the Request for Reaction channel. I'm also going to be doing more community streams where I do shorts. And be expecting those sometime soon. The 5th of September? Yes, I know Fan is uploading. I actually found out yesterday. Until then, guys, we're just gonna enjoy Old Guardsman Party, and I'm gonna be doing a whole bunch of stuff. Diclonius, you're gonna be heading back to Alabama. Sounds good, bud. I know you were talking about that quite a bit the last time we had a chance to talk. I am going to go ahead and end the stream. I'm going to turn on the air conditioner in my room, and I'm going to try to get this place below the surface of the sun. Until then, though, confinement is short but amazing. SCP Confinement. That's a series? That's an actual series. Well, the way I'm going to handle is I'm going to do a straw poll with most of the requests that I find on there that are longer than a certain amount of episodes. I've seen a couple of requests for series that are shorter, like a lot of things done by Noman. So we'll check that out. Diclonia says he's got a Discord you can blame him at. In any case, guys, I'm going to head out. Thank you guys for joining me. I'm going to go in a few minutes. I'm going to get the Hospitaller, stir the Hospitaller from her slumber. We're going to be heading out today to go take care of something I'd rather not take care of. But it's something that will bring closure to a situation that happened this week. I hope you guys had fun. I hope you enjoyed all the new stuff, like as far as the chat function, all the other kind of stuff. I've been wanting to do this for a bit now, and I finally had some time where I had about like a couple hours to play with it. And we'll see how it works out. We'll just see how it works out. All right, guys. What's this? All right, so we'll see you guys later. And I hope you guys have a good day. I'll catch you guys next time. And now